by the chairman of the 12th NPC Standing Committee, Mr. Zhang Dejiang. And joining me here in the studio is Wang Chengguang, Professor of School of Law from Tsinghua University, and also Francesco Sisi, Professor from Renmin University. Thanks for coming, gentlemen. And for the very latest, you can log on to CGTN Live app, where the event will be streamed live. And now let's first turn to our reporter Hona, who is now standing by at the Great Hall of the People. Good afternoon, Hona. You are the delegates corridor, obviously, and give us a brief introduction about that mechanism, who will pass there, and what they will talk to the press.
Well, as you can see behind me, this 100-meter red carpet, you can call it the Delegates Corridor or the Delegates Passage. It is a place where NPC deputies and CPPC members can meet with the media, and the reporters can raise preliminary questions before they enter the main hall. Well, it is a place where the media reporters can have more targeted questions to the NPC deputies. This afternoon, we'll have 7 NPC deputies. They came from all walks of life. They came from both from grassroots to provincial level officials from both Zhejiang Province, Heilongjiang Province, as well as Xizang Autonomous Region. And we can also see there are successful entrepreneurs such as Mr. Chairman Liu Qingfeng. He is the chairman and the president of iFlyTech, which is a high-tech company, and also he is supposed to talk about the topics on artificial intelligence. And at the same time, we'll have this famous director and filmmaker Jia Zhangke talking on in topics related in the film industry. And we'll also see Mr. Zhang Rong. He is he's a principal from Xiamen University. Well, this we call it the Delegates Passage. It is a place normally held for the minister, but this year the plenary session has for the first time opened the Delegates Passage for NPC deputies and CPPCC members. Normally, before they enter the main hall of the Great Hall, at the east gate of the Great Hall, they will become the target of constant barrage of camera flashes, and they will be targeted by the media reporters. And by opening this passage, the NPC deputies can have a better chance to communicate with the reporters. And it also shows the confidence and openness of the organizing committee. So, yeah.
And normally those delegates are supposed to listen to Mr. Zhang Dejiang, the chairman of the Standing Committee of the 12th NPC Congress. What exactly can we expect from that report?
Right. This afternoon, the chairman of the National People's Congress Central Committee, the top legislator Zhang Dejiang, will deliver a work report on the legislative work of the NPC Standing Committee during the past 5 years. Well, we would like to say the lawmakers have weighed heavily on the legal front in 2 aspects. One is the national security front. The other is legislation regarding environmental protection. Well, we have seen the lawmakers have passed the national security law in 2050 and the anti-terrorism law, and the national security law is considered to be the most comprehensive, overarching, and the fundamental law in the national security field. And for the environmental protection law, back in 2015, the lawmakers passed the environmental protection law and the air pollution, the law on air pollution prevention law, as well as the soil and water pollution law. These are all the achievements made by the top legislature during the past 5 years in the environmental protection. Well, the environmental protection law not only puts on the toughest punishments on polluters, but also it clarifies the responsibilities of different government organizations when it comes to environmental pollution supervision. So we would like to hear more reports from the top legislator, but now I have to give the floor to the delegates as they are coming right now. Back to you.
Of course, and we will try to carry live their addresses later on. Thank you very much, Hona, for your reporting from inside the Great Hall of the People. And as Hona said, the 12th Standing Committee entered this 5th year, and this is also the last year of their tenure. Since the 18th CPC National Congress, well, the 12th Standing Committee of NPC has been implementing its duties and passed multiple laws. Let's take a look what they have achieved.
President Xi Jinping said the country should govern by law. And so in the past 5 years, new laws and revisions were introduced and came into effect. This included 25 new laws, 127 revisions, 45 decisions involving major law issues, and 9 legal interpretations. During this period, legislation in major sectors such as national security and ecological civilization strengthened greatly. Laws regarding national security include anti-terrorism, network security, and national intelligence. These are not merely quantitative changes, but also a qualitative one. Significant changes were also made to ecological laws, with nearly 20 laws or amendments carried out. This includes regulations on environmental protection, water pollution prevention, and wildlife protection. There were also new laws in the arts and culture sector. This includes the Film Industry Promotion Law, the first ever one within China's cultural industry. The Standing Committee also passed a public library law, one that standardizes many services in public libraries around the country. These laws are based on the actual needs and development trend of China's cultural industry and has made up the legal shortcomings in this field.
So lawmakers are supposed to make laws. How they've been doing? Now let's turn to our studio guests from some discussions. Let me start with you, Professor Wang.
Yes.
Of course, the 12th NPC say they have made many laws, especially national security and environmental protection. How would you evaluate their work as legislators?
In my opinion, I think this Congress, 12th National People's Congress, has done a tremendous and impressive work. Within 5 years, they have accomplished quite a lot, making 25 new laws, including terrorism law and national security law, cyberspace security law, etc. So there are quite a number of new laws has been made, and even though NPC has declared that it has made a preliminary framework of legal system, including all the laws and regulations, but we know that still there are quite a number of views.
That was announced by NPC Chairman Wu Bangguo 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's the previous Congress. But we know still there are some fields we better need some new laws to be drafted, and for this Congress they have accomplished that work and promulgated such a number of new laws, and also it has made a lot of amendments and revisions of the current existing law, including environmental protection law and water protection law, etc. So there are quite a number of revisions, and also in terms of food safety and drug administration, quite a large number of new rules has been made and to be incorporated into the existing law.
And people are asking why the 12th NPC are focusing so much attention on national security and environment.
Well, national security, of course, is one of the key area for every nation, for every country. So in China, it's becoming closer to the center of the world, and also national security become one of the major issues. So in this area, we do not have previously so many drafted laws, and we have to make up to fill in the vacancy and in terms of national security in order to really compatible with the increasing status of China in the international community. And also for environmental protection, we all know that environmental deterioration is one of the major issues of China, and which draws the concern from almost every citizen, from all the branches of the government, and of course, it also draws attention from the international community. Therefore, in this area, we need to revise the current laws in order to meet the new demands, to really accomplish what the central government calls for ecological civilization. So this is also very important. And also for civil law field, there is a great efforts has been made to make civil codes in China. And in this Congress, they have made the general general principles, not only general principles, general articles of the civil law. So which is actually the very important major piece of the civil code. So based on that, I think in the following years, the other relevant regulations and laws will be made in order to accomplish the ambition to draft the Chinese civil law code.
And Francesco, you are an outsider. How do you like the Chinese lawmaking process? And also the stresses and the focuses of the lawmakers on certain areas?
Well, from the outside, it's hard to gauge, hard to judge. But I'm most interested about the civil code. The civil code is actually very important in any country, and it should be passed. At least this is the rumor that goes around by the 2020. So in a couple of years, this could actually improve all the investment environment in China, and also create a better situation for small and medium enterprises. And I heard that the new civil code will also have a quite consistent part on commercial code, so how to the transaction, property. I think this could be a landmark in changing China and getting China really on the next phase of development, legal, and I would say also as institutional development.
As Francesco mentioned, civil code is very important, but why it has taken so much time to have a final document on civil code, although we have general guidelines there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I totally agree with Francesco's view that the civil code is the major piece of law, or even the foundation of the market economy. In China, the general program of the reform is going to introduce market economy into China, and therefore there must be a solid legal foundation. Civil code, along with the reform process, we have been accomplished piece by piece. We have contract law, property law, and the general principles of civil law. But now we have to consolidate them, all these separate pieces, into one solid, code.
As you said, we had those separate pieces already in place. But how to put them together? What is the most difficult thing of having a full, comprehensive document, including all those things?
Well, all these pieces of law are made in different periods of the reform, addressing to particular periods of time and particular problems associated with the reform. So the reform so far has come to second stage, or even a higher stage, and in which we must consolidate all the past experience. And one way is to put all the separate laws into a coherent, systematic code. So general provisions of civil law is one of the major pieces, which will lay the foundation.
So you are saying it is difficult because China is changing. A lot of relationships are changing, and
That's
the
right.
law
That's
should
right.
be in line.
Yeah. For example, the reform of the state-owned enterprises, and also reform of the mixed ownership in the economic sector. So all these has been recent moves, and which are not fully covered by the existing codes, the separate codes. So therefore, based on our experience, and also we need to put all these separate laws together to find the inherent logics and also a system for all these separate codes in order to really meet the demand of the ongoing economic reform and also the market economy in China.
And that's why the lawmakers have a lot on their shoulders. But this is a packed agenda this afternoon for China's top legislators. During the third plenum this afternoon, we're going to see that lawmakers will vote on a list of officials to oversee the counting of ballots, including 2 chiefs. They are recommended by each delegation, while the chiefs are recommended by the Congress Presidium. And after that, legislators will vote on the draft constitutional amendments, which they've been deliberating over the past week. And then they will hear top legislator Zhang Dejiang's work report on the NPC's work, and Zhang will deliver his report as NPC Standing Committee Chairman of the 12th National People's Congress. Well, China's constitution has actually been amended 4 times since 1982. And our own Zhou Yun tells what the amendments were, as well as the current status of this latest version.
The
Constitution is China's fundamental law of state and holds supreme legal authority. Adopted in 1982, the current Constitution has been amended 4 times. Each amendment must be proposed by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress or by more than 1/5 of the deputies to the NPC. It can only be adopted by a vote of more than 2/3 of all the deputies to the Congress. The Constitution has proven to be effective in China's current situation and still being perfected to meet the changing demands of changing times. For instance, in 1988, the First Amendment affirmed the legal status of the private sector as well as transfer of land use rights. And in 2004, China enshrined human rights protection into the Constitution for the very first time in history. The latest amendment is expected to take place at this year's National People's Congress. The proposal includes writing new thoughts and values into the Constitution, as well as setting up a supervisory commission as a new type of state organ. The amendment will apply to the parties and people's theoretical, practical, and systematic innovation outcomes to advance the rule of law in this new era. Whatever change is made, it is to ensure the Constitution's continuity, stability, as well as authority.
And now let's hear what Mr. Zhang Sujun talk about on the issue of constitutional amendment. He is the Vice President of the China Law Society and also a delegate to the 13th National People's Congress. He's also a delegate to the 19th CPC National Congress last October.
It has been 14 years since the last amendment, and China has witnessed dramatic changes in that time. China's GDP exceeded 80 trillion RMB in 2017, which is more than $12 trillion and ranked second in the world.
So let's go back to our studio discussions about one of the top agendas for this afternoon is the amendment to the Constitution. The world is watching why China needs to amend its constitution, what will be added, and will be voted on the NPC deputies this afternoon. Let's talk about the ideological change first, because the amendments to the constitution this time will enshrine Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. To put a thought into a constitution, it basically says the ideological undertone of your constitution. Why do we need to do that? What it is aimed at? Mr. Wang?
This is a kind of Chinese practice. And within the ongoing reform, we can see at the different stages, particularly with a particular leading group or the Congress, and we have different agendas. And although the reform is the final agenda, but nevertheless, the reform has gone through different periods, different stages. So at every stage, there are some very clear new thoughts and new ideas of the reform guiding the Chinese progress. So therefore, it has been a past practice already. We have been putting, Deng Xiaoping's thoughts and also different, political agendas and ideological thinking into the Constitution. And with the current leaders, and particularly with the current Congress, we need to consolidate the new ideas, particularly trying to deepening the reform for the coming years. And so I do regard this is a very important step, which will incorporate the new ideological thinking, particularly targeting at the current social problems and also guiding the future reform. So this is a necessary step to incorporate the new ideological thinking addressing for the future. So it's not a new move, it's actually the practical practice.
It has been
China.
a Chinese practice for many years.
Yes, and also the current amendment trying to introduce Xi Jinping's thought of the Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era is after, the last amendment almost, more than 13 years, 14 years.
14 years ago.
14 years ago. So at the crossroad of the future reform, we really need to have a consolidated thoughts and which can really guide the future progress.
Obviously, the aim here at the Chinese leadership is to rally or unite the whole nation around one ideological and philosophy. Francesco, how do you look at Chinese practice of doing this?
Well, China is not unique in this. I mean, in the West, in a way, although it is not a country, it's not a state in a traditional way, the Holy See, the Vatican, works in the same way. They establish a new principle, and then from that principle, they draw assumptions, they draw deductions. And this is not the way of some Western democracy, but it's been practiced elsewhere. China has to establish a new principle, a new philosophy, and from that philosophy it will derive a lot of deductions, a lot of laws, a lot of practical things. What is practical things? To be practical, I think China wants to go into a new era. Xi Jinping's thought is about to take China into a new era. His thought is about the new year, which will start the year 2020. We heard at the 19th Party Congress. We know that the civil code will be prepared by then, and the civil code we know is a pillar for that. We have the philosophical main thrust that should take China in the next 30 years. So China, in a way, works in this way, has worked in this way, and will work in this way to establish philosophical framework, and from the philosophical framework to derive practical conclusions.
And another Chinese way is also reflected in the amendment this time. That is the clarification of CPC's position in the Constitution. It says the leadership of the CPC is the defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Well, the leadership of the CPC is actually included in the amendments, but is in the preamble. But this time around, it is in Article 1 of the Constitution. It is highlighted.
Right.
Why do we need to highlight this principle in the Constitution?
From legal perspective, we see that, the CPC's leadership has been enshrined into the Constitution, the current Constitution, in 1982 from the very beginning. But the leadership, description was in the part of the preamble. And the legal argument is that whether the preamble is legally binding or is just a summary of the past experience, or is it just a description of the current situation. So there are quite a number of debates over this legal issue going on. So for this current amendment is trying to consolidate the past experience and to put it not only in the preamble but also try to put it into the articles of the Constitution.
So it has a legal constitutional basis for this principle.
And it's 100% clear this is a binding article within the Constitution, and to really legally realize the leadership or leading role of the party.
And Francesco, I think this is why many Western critics are blaming China for the role of the CPC. Now, okay, we have our delegates already in the corridor. They have something to say to the press. Let's try to cut in to the great of the people.
This is Mr. Liu Qingfeng
from Alpha Tech. Mr. Zhang Long, Chancellor of Xiamen University. Mr. Jia Zhangke, a renowned film director. Now the floor is open for questions. Thank you. I'm with the China Economic Daily. My question goes to Mr. Jia Zhangke. You've been returning to your hometown Shanxi several times and being part of the Pingyao Film Festival. So what is your experiences of combining your career with the development of your hometown? I just finished shooting my latest film just before the two sessions. It's a story that took place in my hometown, Shanxi. I was born and raised there, and was an important part of my emotional world. In the past years, we've in Shanxi have encountered major difficulties, and we are very worried about the development of our hometown. The provincial government in the years have been making effort to realize industrial upgrading and economic transformation. And I, as a person born and raised in Shanxi, also felt their passion, inspiration, and aspiration. And I also want to do my contribution to the development of my hometown, especially after President Xi Jinping's visit to Shanxi. Therefore, I decided to make my contribution, and that's why I started and initiated the Pingyao Film Festival. Shanxi has rich cultural heritage, but it needs to be stimulated by more resources and passions and inspiration from outside world, and that's one of the inspiration for me to initiate this Pingyao Film Festival. And this idea was supported by provincial, the city government, as well as the county government. The leaders of governments of all levels all talked to me, saying that we want to incorporate market mechanism and more new ideas into this festival. Therefore, the government now took the leading role in holding this festival, while the enterprises chip in and participated actively in this effort. In this way, the cultural resources can move from big cities to small cities or even small towns. With this effort, in October last year, the first Pingyao film exhibition was successfully held, and 52 films from 20 countries were exhibited during this activity, and the box office selling rate is as high as 90%. Young people came to Pingyao to talk about films, to conduct cultural exchanges, which is a clear demonstration that China has come to a new stage when we can share modern culture as well as share all kinds of international culture at a grassroots base. Chinese film industry has achieved major success and leapfrog success in the past few years. And the box office last year reached 55.9 billion. When I shot my first film, the box office yearly on that time it was only 1 billion. But during the Spring Festival season alone, the box office hit 10 billion. What's more exciting is that in 2017, China's box office accounted for 53% of the world's total. That means that we have gaining support from the viewers. I have a lot to say and a lot of suggestions, especially when it comes to the cultivation of talents. For example, for us to hold a exhibition in Shanxi, we need talents from home and abroad. We need curators and artists, directors. That is also one of my proposals to the sessions. To do better films, we also need talents. In a year, we used to make only about 20 films, but now the number has reached 800 or 900. Therefore, we need higher investment in education, in talent cultivation, and better infrastructure and conditions so as to give more support to young directors. I believe that's one of my proposals to the session. whether in Shanxi or in China's film industry as a whole. We need to discover problems in practice and solve these problems in order to make progress. According to General Secretary Xi Jinping's report to the 19th CPC Congress, he said that culture is important to national rejuvenation. As a director, I echoed what General Xi has said, and our work is also linked with the fate of the entire nation. And I believe we will try our best to make better work and to express our gratitude to the viewers. I believe that the future of my hometown Shanxi will be better, and Chinese film has every reason to be confident.
China Education newspaper. My question is for Zhang Rong. How do you perceive the development of the Double World Class initiative? And can you talk about the development of Xiamen University as well? Good afternoon. Thank you for your question. I would like to say thank you to friends from the press for your support to Xiamen University. To develop world-class disciplines in universities is a very important strategic decision of the CPC Central Committee. This is a milestone in the history of China's education. World-class universities should have world-class contributions to the humanity. So in developing world-class universities and disciplines, we have to establish world-class capacities and systems. By world-class systems, we have to world-class disciplines, talents, and support systems. Without world-class disciplines, we couldn't have world-class universities. Disciplines are the foundation and the cornerstone of world-class universities. In developing world-class disciplines, the principle we follow is first to focus on the core capacities and qualities. Number two, we have to focus on distinctive and unique advantages. Number three, we have to integrate different resources and ecosystems to develop a more effective and reasonable discipline system. But the discipline system is based on talents. Without talents, we couldn't have world-class disciplines either. On this particular front, we have to give priority to the cultivation of talents. Let me give you two examples. And there is a very famous journal called Nature Biotechnology. Every year, this journal would give assessment and ranking of the translation of biotechnology. And they will rank the top 20. And in the past several years, we have no Chinese technology and professors on the list. But in last year, we had two, both from Xiamen University, one ranking number 7 and the other one ranking number 12. In 2016, academician from Xiamen University was elected as the chairperson of International Electrochemistry Council, which is the first in China. We also have to develop institutional arrangement to support world-class universities. And governance system is also very important. This will help us to arrive at the goal as early as possible and provide governance arrangements and institutional support to our initiative. World-class universities also rely on world-class support structures and systems. On this particular front, we have to deepen our reform and constantly improve institutions and mechanisms to provide guarantee for this initiative. Another very important aspect is capacity building. To begin with, to develop talents is critical, as I mentioned before. Let me give you another example. In Xiamen University, we have a dormitory where many students have lived. There used to be one class. 3 of the students in the same class lived in a dormitory, and all of them were elected fellows and members of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and also the U.S. Academy of Sciences and Arts. So without world-class talent, we couldn't possibly develop world-class universities. Secondly, technological innovation and scientific advancements are also critical. We must constantly reinforce our independent and original innovation capacities to serve the national strategies and the needs for economic growth and development. In Xiamen University, we have a very famous project doing research on the diagnostics of HIV and AIDS, and this has been piloted in 42 countries, serving over 500 million people. At the same time, we also produced the first hepatitis B vaccine, and also produced a lot of medical solutions to the world population. And this has made important contribution to the health of the global population as well as the initiative of Healthy China. In addition, we have been committed to inheriting and carrying forward the fine results of Chinese civilization and cultures. And we have to creatively translate these fine results into progress and tell a better story about the Chinese cultures and civilizations. On capacity building, another very important part is to build world-class international exchange and cooperation capacity. World-class universities have to rely on partnerships and cooperation to grow and prosper. That's why we need a leading international exchange and cooperation platform. Just now, you mentioned the University of Xiamen unit in Malaysia, and this Malaysian unit of our university was developed thanks to the support of the central government. General Secretary Xi Jinping also witnessed the signing of the agreement between our Malaysian section and our university. And this is actually part of the strategy we have taken to promote and participate in the Belt and Road Initiative. And it is also the first by the Chinese universities to expand overseas. The goal is to leverage the existing international environment to develop multidisciplinary talents who are well versed in international affairs and cultures. We can see that smooth progress has been made, and we have 900 mu of campus covering 13 disciplines and majors, and the first stage of the project has been completed, and we have provided favorable conditions to over 2,000 students, and by the end of this year, the student body would increase to over 4,000. And I visited the campus this year, and the two governments also thought highly of the achievements we have made. So we hope to become the pearl and the flagship in the cooperation between China and Malaysia in promoting higher education in the two countries, and I'm very confident in this initiative, and I'm committed to producing more high-caliber talents to our international drive.
Well, that's two NPC deputies talking to the press, one filmmaker and one educator, talking about how their work has changed the country and their own business. And for more on the NPC's third plenum this afternoon, let's cross over to our correspondent Tian Wei, who is now standing by the Great Hall of the People. Good afternoon, Tian Wei.
Good afternoon to you, Zhou.
Yeah, the NPC delegates will probably soon vote on the draft constitutional amendments. Obviously, that has generated a lot of interest and attention. What can you tell us about the voting process?
Yes, as you can hear from the background, there's a bell ringing that is asking the NPC deputies to come into the Great Hall of the People. All of them are going to be here to vote for the constitutional amendments. Now, how does that work, the Chinese procedure? The constitutional amendment proposals are to be made by two ways. One is by the Standing Committee of the NPC. The other is by more than 1/5 of the overall numbers of the NPC deputies. Of course, this time it is by the Standing Committee of the NPC. As the world has known over the past few days that there would be several areas the constitutional amendment proposal so far has touched on. One is about the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. According to the proposal, the Chinese Communist Party leadership is going to be the ultimate feature of the Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics. And that, if adopted, is going to be written into Article 1 of Chapter 1 of the People's Republic Constitution. The second thing, of course, is the power and the scale of the monitoring committee or commission. That, of course, the Supervision Commission is going to be, according to the proposal, have this power to exercise supervision free from any interference from any administrative organs, public organizations, as well as individuals. And the third part, which has also been widely reported in the media over the past few weeks, is about the term limits of the president and the vice president. Having said that, though, this is only the content. So how are the people's deputies, more than 2,000 of them, going to vote for this? As you can see, they are already gradually sitting on the first floor right behind me, and also on the stage and scattered around on the very first floor of the People's Great Hall of the People. There are 28 ballot boxes. So these deputies are going to be given one person, one vote, and that is going to be a paper vote. As you may know, over the past few years, when it comes to legislations, it's usually voting by hand raising or by pushing the button, letting the deputies pushing the button, whether they agree or not agree or abstain. But this time it's going to be used by a paper ballot. That's supposed to be a very special arrangement. And when it comes to constitutional amendments votings, it has been like this for years. So they're going to be given a paper ballot. On the paper ballot, what is being written? Three things. In both the Mandarin Chinese and 7 ethnic minority languages. The boxes are there. One is to agree, the other is disagree and or oppose, and the third is abstain. So they are going to fill in the blanks according to the choice that they have made and fill in the paper ballot, then put it into the red box right there on the stage and also scatter around on the first floor of the Great Hall of the People. Eventually, there's going to be a 35-people supervision committee coming from different delegations, including those from Hong Kong and Macau. They're going to supervise the whole voting process, and the cast of the ballot is going to be monitored, and eventually it's going to be counted by an electronic system. And yet this process is also going to be monitored by 2 people. They are the special designated supervisors. Eventually, when the result is announced, it is going to be announced by Mr. Zhang Dejiang, who is the chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee. Zhou Yue.
Well, that's probably one of the most important votes for those NPC deputies in their life. So I presume you talked to some of them, what they think about the amendment to the Constitution, and do they share with you how they're going to vote?
You're exactly right. Earlier we have already explained this very complicated voting procedure. So the current constitution was adopted in 1982. Over the past few decades, 4 revisions have been done. The last one was 2004. So you can imagine, Zhou Yue, 14 years from the last one, certainly a big responsibility for all the deputies of the National People's Congress this time. And they're quite excited. They have been debating and discussing about that over the past few days. Not only the NPC deputies, but also members of the CPPCC members, even though they are not voting for this because they're not the people's deputies. They are discussing it as well. Among the CPPCC invitees this time, there are several, a team of them coming from overseas. They're not Chinese citizens, but they're special invitees by CPPCC. This is a very special arrangement for this year. They have also been talking and debating about the constitutional amendments. Among them, Fred Tang is coming from the United States. I talked to him briefly about his impression and the words that he has been exchanging with his counterparts. Let's listen in.
I think they're doing a pretty good job right now. And I think the people of China, that's more important, is comfortable with that. And I think that that's very important. And also recognizing all the generations of leaders, their contributions. And China is a continuously evolving country, but it's not changing direction. It's going through a direction that actually enhancing in each of the generations.
China now needs to make tremendous effort in order to reform.
Right.
But things are hard to push. So how to make sure it will be done and done efficiently? And how is that interact with what we are seeing right now, constitutional amendment?
In order to carry out the agenda and the reform, we need a continuous leadership. In a country like America, when you have a second term and your term limits, you go into a lame duck session, which means your authority is already cut. And people are not listening, no matter how great the agenda, they're thinking about the next term. This is actually very helpful to China's overall growth and to achieve its goal at that time.
And how do you think, after this constitutional amendment, if approved by the National People's Congress, could, to what extent, to rally the crowds in China?
Well, by attending these conferences, I think that there's a lot of studying, understanding, analysis of this whole policy. And that has to be cascaded down to each of the level. One of it is certainly the credibility of the government. And I think by doing in this way, it's very meticulous way, voting, approving it, having drafts of it, disclosing to the public, it makes more credible. And once it's approved, I'm pretty sure a lot of the Chinese people will understand what the leadership is going through and how they can support this overall goal.
Amending the Constitution is obviously one of the top agendas of this year's legislature meeting, but is also the topic of many people around the world. And some heads of foreign organizations and institutions shared their views and opinions.
And this time we can see the new trends in the NPC meetings. And so we saw some constitutional changes and for the constitution this time. And I think it's necessary for a country which comes with more concepts and more cooperation with the world and more development activities in their country. So I think it's understandable, and then with these constitutions and also some other minor constitutions, and China can develop more cooperation between other countries in the world, and also can get more fruitful results from their projects and concepts. So the constitutional reforms, it's understandable for us.
The Constitution should be amended appropriately according to the changing times. We can see China's great development in recent years from the content of this time's Constitution Amendment. I think the Constitution Amendment will also promote China's further development.
About the amendment of the Constitution, let's turn back to our studio guests. There are several items to the amendment Constitution. We talked about the Xi Jinping thoughts and the party's leadership. But one particular issue that has caught the attention of the world, many in the Western press, is the revision to the clause concerning Chinese president and vice president's term limits. First of all, Francisco, do you understand why they're getting at this particular change, and are they legitimate concerns?
Why the foreigners?
Why many Western critics?
Yes, they are worried that China is moving towards some kind of more authoritarian system. So there is, I would say, a concern. The concern is just, I would say, simple. The size of China, population, growth, economy matters for everybody. So whatever moves in China is bound to have an effect worldwide, and therefore everybody pays a lot more attention to whatever changes.
So they're doubting this is for the greater good of this country and this people.
And of course, this will influence also the rest of the world. It's not just an interest in China, but because China is so important for the rest of the world, whatever happens in China is bound to have an impact in the rest of the world. So everybody is worried about themselves
of
as
course.
well.
Now that's legitimate concern in that way. So Mr. Wang, I'd like you to respond to Francesco just said. Will this change, the term limit change, make China more stable, better?
Well, we certainly understand the concerns from the Western society regarding the change of the term limit. And also we understand that there are some kind of concerns or even worries about this change, which could probably bring in some uncertainty for the future leaders. But nevertheless, well, every society, every country has its own situation, has its own particular problems. In order to cope with the Chinese problem, the most important thing at the moment is to make the policy, reform policy, consistent, continuous. So this is, I think, concerning the size of the country and huge population and enormous problems and tasks ahead of us. I think we must make sure there should be a stable leadership within the party, within the state, and in order to make this stable leadership and continuity of the guiding principles.
So you're saying this is actually a response to a special circumstance of China,
right?
Which is what?
Which is to make the current leaders quite stable to carry out, to implement their policies for the years to come. So term limit is changed, but only concerns the key positions within the state, the president and the vice president. It doesn't affect to the other levels of the state or governmental leaders, and also is not a fundamental change of the term system. It's a term limit system concerning these two positions being changed. And the term system is still there, so no matter who's in the position and actually in the term, subject to the term system review, and namely they have to be re-elected, reappointed, so therefore there are sufficient checks and review.
And legally, there is no reinstatement of lifetime service for any leader.
That's actually a different concept. Life term is something, Chinese, people are very much against, and no one agrees. We should have kind of, ever long staying leader in the position whatsoever. And also, most importantly, we do have the People's Congress system. So all these leaders in the position are subject to their review, to their re-election appointment. And also the Communist Party's constitution says very clearly there is no personal cult in whatever form to be adopted within the party, within the government. So the change of the term limit system doesn't mean kind of a lifelong term, or doesn't mean change totally the term system.
Does it make sense to you, Francesco, that the circumstance requires flexibility within the system to let the leader realize his vision?
Well, what I think it's important from my point of view, I don't know if Professor Wang will agree, is to take a long-term view of China. how we got here and what was the situation before. After the Cultural Revolution, basically the reforms of Deng Xiaoping have spread and evolved all power to all different ministries, municipalities, provincial authority. So at the beginning, this spread of power has actually helped the growth of China, because every official felt responsible for his own locality. But now that went too far, I think. So you need to re-centralize things. You need to bring back to the center. In a way,
so that to deliver on those reform targets.
Because it has different. It is a different situation. In a way, Chinese and also Western political thought goes with along the same lines. You need water, you need rain, but too much rain is bad. Too little rain is also bad. So sometimes you need to centralize power, sometimes you need to spread power. Now is the moment to
But what
centralize.
are the problems we should guard against if there is more centralized power at the top? Is there anything we should be cautious of?
Well, certainly within the party, there are so-called democratic review and democratic centralism.
Yes.
And all the leaders and all the party members must adopt the old tradition of the party, which is criticism and self-criticism. I noticed that for the Politburo, there has been conducted several rounds of the self-criticism. That means all the leaders, they must adopt a kind of self-review process and criticizing each other and also criticizing their own weaknesses and find out what are the problems within their practice.
And it will still be a collective leadership decision.
Yeah, still works. And also there are more strengthened kind of review and check system. So one big term has been adopted by the party and also the government is so-called self-imposed revolution. So it's a kind of self-censorship, awareness of their practice and review.
Self-reflection.
Yes, self-reflection.
Another important agenda is, of course, the newly established Supervision Commission, National Supervision Commission. Some say it's another kind of revolution of China's own institutions. First of all, why do we have to establish an independent anti-graft branch other than the government so far has the disciplinary committee and the prosecution office?
This is to meet the current situation of China and also the social demand for anti-corruption. And it means that corruption has really big problem in Chinese society, within the government, within the party. So we have to take it seriously. And one way, legally, systematically, we must set up a more authorized institution to take the sole responsibility of anti-corruption. And previously there were different branches within the party, within the government, within the procuratory organs.
So it's a more unified system.
More unified, in order to make the work more efficient.
Then what is the relationship between the new National Supervision Commission and the party disciplinary committee, or it just overlap?
These two organs, including the Ministry of Supervision within the executive, will be merged together to form this new commission. So this commission has been upgraded in terms of the legal status. It is on the equal footing with the Supreme People's Court, Supreme Procuratory, and also on the equal footing with the State Council. That means under the National People's Congress, there will be 4 organs.
4 independent branches.
Yes. And previously there were 3, the court, procuratory, and State Council. Now we have added one more organ, which is the Independent Supervision Commission, directly under the National People's Congress, and above all the other executive branches, so making it enjoying more high status. And that also means more power, more efficiency, and more kind of authority for carrying out anti-corruption work.
So, Francesco, you understand the rationale behind this is that China still wants to push ahead its anti-corruption campaign.
Yeah, I think this is, they want to have, China wants to have better tools, better instruments. And we can tell that although 5 years of massive anti-corruptions were underway, still there is a lot of corruption going on. And not only the existing corruption, but I think these bodies could have a role in preemptive corruption. Because there are investigations, because people fear they will be sooner or later under stress, they may be not be corrupt. So this could be a very important instrument. Again, this has a historical precedent. In the imperial system, there was something that was along these lines.
Is this similar like what the Hong Kong has been practicing with an independent corruption investigation branch?
Yeah, possibly.
Under the government.
Yes, possibly there was this. There is in Hong Kong. There was in the imperial system. There are some bodies in some countries which have some kind of special anti-corruption body. Here, I would say, it seems to me, but I asked Professor Wang, is more pervasive. It's not just anti-corruption, but it's also about the effectiveness of officials in their jobs. And also, we know that officials are now asked to give an oath, that is, to take more responsibility about their own jobs. So it seems to me more comprehensive, and in a way, it seems to me more in line. But again, I look for guidance, trying to get officials to be more responsible in every way about their jobs, and not just looking for money in bribes.
Wang, you need to respond to this. Where is the boundary of this supervision department, and how does it work?
Well, this is a new body, and this new task has been entrusted into this new body. And I think after the passing of the amendment, after establishing this new organ, there will be a massive work to be done. Number one, to draft and pass relevant laws and regulations to specify their tasks, particularly the procedure, and also they need to set up a kind of institutional connection and kind of collaboration with the judiciary, with the procuratorate, and also with the state council. So not just independent completely from the judiciary or procuratorate. For example, indictment is the authority delegated by the Constitution to the prosecutorate. So even after the establishment of this new commission, I think the commission also need to refer the cases they have been investigated, and for quite kind of certainty they do regard there is economic crime in the case, but they themselves so far need to refer the case to procuratorate.
So it then entered the judicial system.
Yeah, there must be some kind of institutional collaboration.
And that's what the National Supervision Law is all about, to define the role of the Supervision Commission and its relations with the judicial department. You've been watching a special program on the third plenum of the NPC Congress this year. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Two sessions is an exciting time. China has a rich history, but with lofty goals for the future.
As an African journalist covering the two sessions, I will share my insights into what the policies entail and how they will affect my continent and the rest of the world.
1.4 billion people heading in the same direction. How will the policies of the coming days keep the country on track?
Controlling financial risk is most critical. Broadening anti-corruption is most meaningful. President Xi Jinping's vision for 2035 and for 2050 is most enduring.
A team of journalists from China and around the world looking at critically important issues that will help define the 21st century.
The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
If we move together, we can have a dance.
Straight into the eyes.
Poverty alleviation achievement in China is unprecedented.
For me, it's a responsibility.
Straightforward and straight into the new era.
To know more and to sense more.
Straight Talk with Tian Wei from the 2 sessions.
And watching a special coverage on the third plenum of the first session of the 13th National People's Congress, which is right now underway in Beijing. Just now, the legislators passed a draft list of names of officials known as scrutineers. They will oversee the body's balloting this afternoon. And later on, during the meeting, the NPC deputies will then vote on the draft amendment to the Constitution under the eyes of those scrutineers. And then later on, Zhang Dejiang, the chairperson of the NPC Standing Committee, will deliver his work report on behalf of the 12th NPC Standing Committee. And stay with us on CGTN for all those coverage. And earlier we have a report from Mr. Zhang Sujun. He is the deputy chairman of the China Law Society. He shares his insights of the importance of the national supervision reform system, and he also a delegate to the 13th National People's Congress this time, and a delegate to the 19th CPC National Congress last year.
It is important to set the roles of the national supervision system in the Constitution. Reforms of the national supervision system were considered to be a major political structure change, and also a major reform of the legal system at the 19th CPC National Congress last October. Construction of this system is necessary for the anti-corruption campaign, and is also crucial to further carry out anti-corruption work and promote the rule of law. The reform has strengthened the unified party's leadership in the anti-corruption campaign. The Central Commission for Discipline Inspection is under the direct leadership of the CPC Central Committee. The Ministry of Supervision is under the leadership of the CCDI, while other anti-corruption organizations are under the leadership of the People's Procuratorate, which makes the supervision system dispersed. On the other hand, the CCDI has limited monitoring targets that only include leaders within the party and officials in government. It excludes research institutions and people's organizations. Also, the rule of law is not enough. For example, shuanggui is known as an intra-party disciplinary practice that requires a CPC member under investigation to cooperate with questioning at a designated place and a designated time. Fighting corruption in accordance of the law is important as well. We aim to solve all the issues mentioned above, to integrate separate anti-corruption organizations, and ensure to deepen supervision system reform.
As Mr. Zhang mentioned, there are people asking about the legitimacy and efficacy of the investigation methods. For example, the shuanggui methods, to keep a CPC official at a designated place for a designated period of time. Will the National Supervision Commission conduct its investigation differently?
Well, the Party Disciplinary Committee is a party organization. The party organization has never got the legal delegation of power to detain a person. So there has been a very controversial issue arising from the past anti-corruption campaign, whether detaining the person, let's say the shuanggui double designation, is legal or not. So in order to solve this legally awkward situation, after consolidation of all the anti-corruption agencies together within the State Supervision Commission, it becomes a national organ, the state organ. The state organ, based on law, will have the authority granted by law to legalize all the measures, including the previous Shuangui double designation. I believe after establishment of the State Commission, there will be a law regarding holding a person in a particular place for a particular period of time for cooperating with investigation.
So there will be a legal definition
there will
of
be a
what
legal
kind of practice is legal or not.
That will be legal and will be granted by law, and all the detention of the person or restriction of the personal freedom must be granted by law. Namely, there must be a legal ground and authorized by national law. So therefore, after creation of this new commission, I believe the supervision law will contain such provisions concerning legal kind of clarification of this kind of measures.
And Francesco, I don't know how much you get from this, but obviously China wants to institutionalize our anti-corruption process. So do you think this is the right way for China at the right moment? Or what might be the things that we should be careful about?
Well, there are some concerns that if you give a lot of power, too much power to one institution, this institution might begin to abuse this power one way or another. That is, how to check the guardians, the custodians. This is an old quandary. However, now we are at the beginning.
But you understand the rationale is that corruption is so severe that we need an institution to have the power.
And I understand also the rationale that, in a way, there were two institutions. There was the judiciary, which was under the state, and there was the party disciplinary committee, which was under the party. Was it legal because it was under party rule? This is not under government rule, so you need to merge to make it more comprehensive and better understood by everybody. This is a rationale, also legal rationale, which is understandable. However, you know, moving forward, you want to be careful because a lot of power means also the possibility that this power becomes corrupt because you are above any other supervision. You supervise other people. This is a future danger, a future risk.
Let's talk about this, Professor Wang. Yes, as you said, this is an institutionalized anti-corruption organ, but how can we prevent from this institution from abusing its power, because it is a very powerful branch?
Well, this is a very reasonable concern, and also I believe, well, we're going to create the State Supervision Commission. There should be a careful design of the overseeing and checking system. Namely, if one agency has more consolidated power and authority, there should be another way of checking, restricting the power. So if a power without any limit, certainly, well, sooner or later we'll get into other problems. So in order to avoid that tendency, we can certainly set up the overseeing and checking system by the existing system. As Francesco already mentioned, the judiciary, procuratorate organs, and also within the party, there is a kind of superseeing all these practices of different organs. And also within the government, we have the National People's Congress supervision. So I do believe there should be a kind of checking and also reviewing mechanisms within the party, within the governmental structure.
I think the designers of this institution had this problem on their mind because they piloted all these institutions at the grassroots level. They first practiced in Zhejiang and Shanxi provinces. What have we learned from the local operations of the Supervision Commission?
Well, I think a number of issues has been identified, and for example, the authority of indictment is still within the procuratorate, and also adjudication authority is within the judiciary. So this new commission has no such right. That means their investigation, their decision for indicting a person.
So they can still be a gatekeeper before anything happens.
They are actually conducting their own work, and their decision must be referred to the procuratorate, and also subject to the adjudication of the judiciary. So then this commission single-handedly cannot complete all the processes. And also there has been a new issue: to what extent and what stage, well, the lawyers could be involved. So that
do we know that when the lawyers will be?
So far, it's not very clear, and all subject to the new law of the supervision. And so I believe there should be not only that one piece of law, but also corresponding regulations and also detailed rules to handle all these problems. I think all these problems has been already put under consideration already, but there is no smooth path. And for
because it's a new thing.
Yeah, it's even a good decision. We really need to try it and also gradually to accomplish the system by making new regulations and detailed rules, and also institutional kind of collaboration mechanism.
And check and balances.
And also check and balance.
Does that convince you, Francesco?
We shall see. We shall see. I mean, I'm not the only one. But it's interesting. It's interesting process. It's interesting change. It's definitely very important because it tries to address a structural problem in China. We know that there are still a lot of loopholes, things that are uncertain. I'm sure that the global world is going to follow it very, very closely because it is an important stake for China, but I would say also for the rest of the world.
And how do you think this latest development of institutions are in line with the general philosophy of rule of law? China has definitely manifested that we will develop a country rule of law.
Well, there is an element, to be quite frank, of the rule of law which sooner or later must come to the open. That is what you mentioned, checks and balances. And checks and balances that have to be in a way open, not just within a courtroom, within a closed door circuit, but it has to be open. It has to be open also to the outsiders. We know that the NPC does a lot of work checking with common people, looking for advice, opinions, sounding out any other kind of rule.
And court verdicts.
And court verdicts, etc. But because China's decisions are so important and will be so even more important in the future for the world, so the world needs to be somehow also part of this process. We know that, for instance, in America, the world is part of the process, although we cannot vote for it. We can read the paper, we know the process, we can even write a column piece in some American newspapers or voice our opinion in TV. And therefore, we are part of the process in one way. So I think China has to gradually move in that direction because it's so important for everybody, not only for China.
Let's talk about accountability and transparency a little later. Well, facing the press at the Great Hall of the People, China's Supervision Minister, currently in charge of supervision, Yang Xiaodu, explained the specific roles and functions of the proposed National Supervision Commission, which is expected to lead the anti-corruption campaign, of course.
We don't think the Supervisory Commission is an organ with superpower. Most of our work is a reminder to public officers, but no one should doubt our commitment to punish corrupt officials who are obstinate to go their own way. In the past, there were holes in the anti-graft system. That is, the supervision of public officers who are not members of the Communist Party of China and who are not civil servants. The proposed Supervisory Commission shall work together with the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, which means it will report to the CPC Central Committee and will also be led and supervised by them. Meanwhile, the proposed commission will be generated through the NPC election, so it will report to the NPC as well.
So here Mr. Yang Xiaodu basically explained the National Supervision Committee will report to the Central Party Committee and the National People's Congress. And in China's system, the party and the legislature is established in that way. The party is the leading role, but the NPC is the highest power in this country. Let me return to the question of accountability and transparency. Do you think Chinese have more room to improve on to make the system more transparent and make those people who made decisions accountable?
Yes, establishment of this new commission is one way to institutionalize and also legalize anti-corruption campaign. And all the previous practices should be put into the legal review, under the legal review, and also there must be legal grounds for all these practices. And therefore is one effort, one way to legalize, to fulfill the ambition of establishment of the rule of law country. And also the anti-corruption campaign and also this new commission is targeting at a handful of persons, namely the civil servants, the government officials, not targeting the masses, general public. So therefore, we could say one key of the rule of law is to control the power. How to make the power and the control, we must have institutions and institutionalized and legalized system. So establishment of this new commission is one way for realizing rule of law in China and making all the government officials accountable to the public. And also this way of investigation and anti-corruption measures will be more and more open. And this is actually, I would believe, not contrary to the rule of law commitment, but one way to strengthening the rule of law efforts in China.
But you have to admit, Francesco, this should be a gradual process. The Chinese system was much more open than, say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Back then it was more opaque, but it probably takes time and human design to improve it.
Well, of course, I agree. Nobody wants to rock the boat too much. You know, you want to improve things, but keep it steady. And this is, of course, very tricky for China and also for the world, because in a way, 20 years ago, if China went, you know, had a terrible turmoil, something bad happened, its impact in the world economy, in the social order, was not that great. Now, of course, it's much greater. But everything comes with a price. Before, it was really not important, whatever China decided to do. Now it is becoming more important. So, in a way, at the time, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, nobody really cared about the pace of reform. You go slowly or you go fast, nobody cared. Now, because of the growing impact, everybody wants it to be faster, more in agreement with the rest of the world. So there are gives and takes on both sides, I'm
and
afraid.
Do you think the pace of China's reform and evolution is greater than many people in the West expected?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because the international environment has changed. The situation is completely changed. Therefore, the demand for change in China, from China, has greatly enhanced. It is like a small child. A small child needs a bowl of noodles, and he'll be satisfied. But now we have a giant, and this giant needs many kilograms of meat. So it's a different kind of thing. And therefore, whatever decided in China by Chinese will have enormous impact abroad. And how to balance these things it will be, I'm afraid, more and more challenging in the future.
I think there are a lot of people are talking about the Chinese way of conducting public administration. What is your takeaway from the Chinese thinking of doing it? Because obviously you said China is centralizing more power at this time.
Yeah, I think, personally, I agree that now China badly needed some centralization. Because the problem with China was nobody really could take decision, nobody would take responsibility. You had to go through so many channels, so many people. Nobody would bang on the table and say, let's do this or let's do that, because nobody was ultimately responsible. So you had to bring things to the center. And I personally fully agree with that.
I think this makes more sense when China looking at some advanced economies, political systems. When they are back in challenge, being overplayed, nothing is decided and nothing is moved.
Exactly. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. However, it is more important to communicate, to explain the rationale, and to explain also the ultimate goal. Where do you want to go? Because before, it didn't really matter what China decided. Now it matters even more. So if you move even a piece of wood, a little pebble, everybody will, draw attention to that.
But where we're going is that better governance of China also means better chances for the rest of the world. Isn't this what China's been striving for all the time?
Of course, but you have to convince that this is the goal. You cannot just say it. You need to convince. It's not just banging over the table, this is good for China and this is good over the world. You have to do a lot of work. And these changes are enormous, bound to impact the world. So I'm afraid they will take a long time to find and build a consensus. The same consensus that rightly so China is trying to find internally. You went through Zhejiang to have some trial periods, see what is working. This same kind of attention, I'm afraid, has to be paid to the outside world, more and more.
I think the past 5 years, probably a good example. The central leadership has been trying to institutionalize the China system by looking at what we've been done over the past 5 years.
Right. I think, well, the government and also the leading party have been very much aware of what's going on, well, internationally. Not only looking at China, of course, well, the major lessons we need to learn from our own practice, particularly from the previous mistakes we made. And also we should open our eyes to look at, all the foreign countries, to learn from their experience, and also certainly some of their, let's say, lessons we also need to be aware of. And for the partisan debates and also more social turmoils generated by a lot of different opinions.
What some people call adversarial politics.
Yeah, is not really the suit for China, and China needs to be aware of all these possibilities and particularly be aware of, the negative aspect. And also China mainly should summarize its own experience. And from the past reform periods, we can see centralization, decentralization, and in some periods, all the members of a Politburo has its own separate fields. And the central authority has been substantially weakened. And what was the result is a kind of chaotic situation which Chinese people say 9 dragons governing the sea. Nothing has been accomplished with efficiency, even with a very clear line of policy. So therefore, I think learning from Chinese political past, we need to really summarize the experience, good things, and also lessons from the negative aspects. And then we have to look at the current situation and also future task, what we should accomplish. And therefore, we carefully design what is the proper and suitable institution, kind of leading mechanism be established. So I think based on that perspective, the current amendment of the Constitution and all these big moves are suitable for Chinese future development, which certainly will benefit not only China, but the international community.
And also, many people say China is exceptional in a way, because in China, this kind of a unified system has been in practice for over 2,000 years. That's why centralized power makes sense.
That is this centralized power, China has been China for 2,000 years, and other countries.
And the Chinese system has been kind of a unified system.
It has been
a bureaucracy that's working all the way up.
Yes, but China has changed dramatically in the past 100 years, I would say, and it's changed dramatically in the past 40, 50 years. You see, China in the past, for 2,000 years, over 2,000 years, produced all of its GDP along the two rivers. But after the 1990s, for the first time ever, its GDP has been produced along the coast. Before, his GDP was produced by some state enterprises, all in the imperial system under the control of mandarins. The mandarins were really important. But now, since 40 years, the driving force of China has been small and medium enterprises, private entrepreneurs, private practices. What I mean is China is dramatically changing now and has dramatically changed now from the past. It was isolated before, completely isolated for 2,000 years. Now it's part of integrated world. So yes, you need to have the past, to consider the past, but you have to consider the world, because you are integrated in the world like never ever in the past history.
What does this change of economic makeup should affect the political institutional change?
I think, for instance, this Anti-Corruption Institute understands that corruption works in a different way than in the past. It's no longer a party, no longer the old institution that can work. You need a new institution. You need a new mechanism.
This is what happened.
Exactly, because it is different. So, in the future, more adaptation may be necessary, more changes may be necessary. The past is important, but we know that the changes are dramatic as never ever in the past thousands of years of history. So, you know, we have to be careful, I would say.
Say several concerns you have about the adaptation.
I'm concerned, but I'm also optimist. That is, you have to see the problems, you have to see the issues, you have to see the challenges, but I trust that China will find a way, will find a path to overcome these problems.
What kind of problems? Be more specific.
The problem is adaptation. There is the adaptation of the economy, of its economy, to the political system, and the two don't seem to me in balance, and the integration of China in the world. For thousands of years, China was basically isolated. Now, 40% of China's GDP depends on the world. It is part of the world like never before. So it needs to adapt. Of course, the world needs to understand China, needs to adapt to China, but also the other way around.
But isn't it the Chinese government is that that's why we need more centralized power at the party leadership, so that those reforms can be unfolded more efficiently.
I agree.
And be in line with international practice. Because vested interests are in the way.
I do agree, and I do hope that this is the path. To have these changes, you need centralized power. You don't need to bargain all the time with all these small powers. So if the central government comes to an idea, it can put it in practice without too much bargaining. I hope this is the future.
But there is a caveat to what Francisco has been saying, that the central authority should have access to all the information from down below. That will guarantee it will make the right choices. do we have a system that makes sure the central leadership will have access to all information?
I believe so. And since the reform democracy is one of the targets, the national goal for the reform, not only GDP increase, but also to make China more democratic and to make the people's participation more viable. So all these are one of the big items of the reform. So we could look at the legislation, and for every pieces of legislation so far, the major pieces and also the regulations by the executive, we can find their draft on the website. Probably not every piece, but most of the major pieces. Common people can find all this draft put on the website for public opinion, public criticism.
So the government is responsive to the signals, to the signals at the grassroots.
That's right. That's right. And also for all these major policy decisions, there have been gone through various means of opinion soliciting or kind of the meetings for consultancy, etc. There are multiple ways for ensure all these decisions are not made by a single person or a small group of persons, but also reflect the public opinion and really meet the social demands. So I think there has been a lot of ways to make people's participation and democratic decision-making process. That's what is called in China the deliberate democracy, rather than the kind of multi-party democracy. But different country has different traditions, different ways of governance. And China, based on its own history, based on the current experience, and also carefully analyzing what are the tasks ahead of us, I think there has been a good emphasis on democratic way of decision making.
Before we carry out our discussions, I'd like to remind you this is a special coverage on the NPC's third plenum. The NPC deputies have just elected 30 scrutineers for the voting of the amendment of the Constitution, which is now going on inside the Great Hall of the People. We'll keep you updated on the latest results from those ballot counting. Let's turn back to our discussions here. Many people say in the West, China's system is an autocracy. The Chinese scholars, some say, it is a meritocracy married with the Chinese Communist Party. You agree that this is a meritocracy system?
Well, there is a meritocracy, but there is also meritocracy in the West. The West adopted a meritocratic system. The bureaucracy is a meritocratic system from China through the translation of the Jesuits in the 17th century. Basically, all the bureaucracy, all the official bureaucracy in the West was adopted from China. So there is bureaucracy and there is meritocracy in the West too. This is, I wouldn't say meritocracy, it is just Chinese. It's been because the West has been Sinified for 200-300 years in this respect.
And this Chinese meritocracy problem, the problem is how do you keep every member of this bureaucracy integrity intact?
Yes, and the problem is...
And that's why we have this anti-corruption
Exactly,
system.
And that is the problem, who checks the custodians. This is an old political issue. It is in China, it is in India, it is in the West, everywhere. The balancing and the checking of the custodians, the checks and balances are hard to find a suitable solution. It changes with time. It changed with time. We have in Europe a system, in America a system. This was not always the same. It changed. We have a system in China. We see this system changing in China. Perhaps it will change in the future. This is all I'm saying.
But is it changing with the time in the right direction, in your opinion?
in the right direction. We don't know what is the direction exactly.
The
in
direction
the future.
now is more centralized power, less accountability.
I think in this moment, now the direction is right. China needed more centralization of power, fewer people to decide more things. You had in the past lots of people deciding few things. You have to have the opposite to challenge, to meet the challenges of China and of the world. Fewer people making more and bigger decisions. This is the right move. What will be the next move? I don't know. It depends not only on China, but also on the pressure and the concerns of foreign countries. We shall see.
But this is also an issue of, is this a new social contract with these people? And what we are now doing is that the NPC deputies will cast their votes on whether or not amend the Constitution as it is proposed by the CPC. Do you think we have wide-ranging political support of what the CPC has proposed about what the country should be headed?
Well, by talking with ordinary people and also looking at the newspaper report, and we can come to a kind of agreement that the majority of the people are supporting the current amendments, and also pretty sure these amendments will be passed by the National People's Congress, even though there are different opinions still existing. But I think, these opinions certainly will make the government and also NPC more aware of the possible problems and risks for future, but that will not actually stop the current amendments and institutionalization.
About the popular support, let's look at the mechanism first. This was first proposed by the CPC at the 19th CPC Congress, and according to Wang Chen, the Deputy NPC Legislator-in-Chief, he said the CPC has solicited opinions from grassroots CPC members and government officials, in thousands of them, and then they made the proposal to the Central Committee. What do you make of these, the legitimacy of this, by soliciting opinions from grassroots CPC members, make a proposal at the CPC and then at the NPC Congress?
Well, the soliciting of the opinions are not only confined within the delegates of NPC. The opinions are solicited from different provinces, different professions, and also from different fields. So I think there is a wide solicitation of the opinions and the suggestions of the amendments, even though within limited scale, not for all the masses, everyone to participate. I think there are kind of sufficient ground for getting different opinions for the amendments so far.
So this is not just a top-down system. There is bottom-up.
Actually, it's a kind of carefully designed and implemented process from the top-down, kind of solicitation, and amendment of the Constitution was the decision, idea of the Central Communist Party Committee, and also in order to make it more reflective of the different opinions, they sent out this idea for amendments to different provinces
for
feedback. And then various meetings have been conducted in order to get all these different opinions. And finally, they consolidate all these opinions into the current amendment proposal. So even though not soliciting opinion from every citizen, is soliciting opinion from different sectors, different provinces.
So it's a representative process.
It's a representative. Yeah,
but in a condensed way.
In a condensed way. And I think, the kind of concern is that if throughout this idea to the whole society, there would be different opinions and generate probably more debates rather than consensus. So deliberate democracy is a way to get people to discuss the various opinions sufficiently, rather than just voicing your voice loudly. So this is a particular Chinese way of developing the deliberate democracy.
So it's basically still a trade-off between efficiency and fairness, because
right.
you have to make a choice. You want to make decisions quick and efficient. You also want to make the decisions fair and just.
Yes, I think it is a move in the right direction, and especially in the direction China needs now. That is, to try to bring things together, to create a better center of decision makers. Professor Wang mentioned the time when there were 9 dragons governing the sea. I think in a way it was worse than division of power in the West, because people say, oh, in the West the division of power is ineffective, one power blocks one another. In fact, in China, one could argue that at the time there were 9 powers blocking one another. So it was even more chaotic then. Now you have to bring things to one center, one main engine for change.
And decision maker.
And this is a move in the right direction in many ways, I think.
At least for now. They have a political agreement on that. You've been watching a special program on the NPC Congress. The NPC deputies are casting their votes on amendment of China's constitution. We'll keep you posted as our coverage continues. The biggest annual political gathering in the world's most populous nation. Some topics to deliberate and discuss. A new state leadership lined up. A draft revision to the Constitution. From March the 3rd, CGTN takes you right to the heart of Beijing for a behind-the-scenes look at how 5,000 political representatives and advisors get things done, and how their decisions can have a ripple effect across the world. Join us on CGTN for an insight look into the 2 sessions 2018.
We travel across the country to gauge the most pressing issues.
We talk to the people about their greatest concerns.
And explore the changes closely watched around the world.
It's insignificant.
Not come to an end. The ultimate power.
Not only for the channel expansion and reality. Join us for a special coverage of China's political season
and see how the new government launches into its new era.
2 sessions is an exciting time. China has a rich history, but with lofty goals for the future.
As an African journalist covering the 2 sessions, I will share my insights into what the policies entail and how they will affect my continent and the rest of the world.
1.4 billion people heading in the same direction. How will the policies of the coming days keep the country on track?
Controlling financial risk is most critical. Broadening anti-corruption is most meaningful. President Xi Jinping's vision for 2035 and for 2050 is most enduring.
A team of journalists from China and around the world looking at critically important issues that will help define the 21st century.
The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line.
If we move together, we can have a dance.
Straight into the eyes.
Poverty alleviation achievement in China is unprecedented.
To me, it's a responsibility.
Straightforward and straight into the new era.
To know more and to sense more.
Straight Talk with Tian Wei from the 2 sessions.
And you've been watching our special coverage on the NPC session, the third plenum of the 13th National People's Congress. We've been talking about popular support. Any political institution and any political decision is actually a response to people's demands and aspirations. Do we have enough political debate among our people so that those decisions actually reflect what the people want, in which direction the country should be headed? Mr. Wang, what's your sense?
Well, as we already discussed, it's a kind of representative democracy. It's not going to the whole society asking for different opinions. But so far, I think the scope for all these representatives and the selected areas and the professions and the fields, different opinions has been quite fully expressed. So in that regard, I would say the current amendment proposal is based on sufficient opinion ground.
And do people have legitimate concern when they worry if there's too much centralization of power on leadership? There might be risks that they are making wrong decisions. And is there enough institutional checks on this?
Well, apparently there are different opinions, and also people do have this kind of worries, particularly considering our past experience during the Cultural Revolution and personal account. Now we have the consolidated, leading groups within the party, within the government. Certainly this kind of worry and concern are legitimate, I would say. But nevertheless, if we go into details, we find the change of the term limit is not, the change of the term system. And also there are more kind of institutional building, try to put everyone, including the leaders, under the review, under the check, according to the party constitution and national law. No one is above the law. So this is a particular slogan and has been already enshrined into a lot of documents, has been reflected into our administrative laws, constitution. So in that regard, I don't think China will go back completely back to the Cultural Revolution, that, the personal account will be reintroduced. I don't think the majority of the people will accept that.
There should be still communication problems because the leader has a vision and the leader is asking a new pact with his people to deliver on those promises. And he's saying that we need some flexibility of the system in the longer time. Okay, we have breaking news. Do we have this confirmed? We have this breaking news at the NPC Congress about the amendment of the Constitution. Do we have it? Yes, we have been confirmed that China's National People's Congress has just voted to pass the draft amendments to the Constitution. This came at the third plenum of the 13th NPC first session. The NPC just provided a list of the overseen ballot, and after the process, finally the Constitution amendment has been passed by more than 2,000 NPC delegates at the third plenum of the NPC. Let's go live to the NPC Congress venue inside the Great Hall of the People, and then Zhang Dejiang, the chair of the NPC Standing Committee, will deliver a report on the NPC's committee's work. This is happening after the over 2,000 NPC deputies just to pass the amendment of the Constitution as outlined and proposed by the CPC committee. Top legislator Zhang Dejiang.
Fellow deputies, on behalf of the Standing Committee of the 12th National People's Congress, I will now present to you a report on its work for your deliberation. Let me begin with a review of our major initiatives over the past 5 years. The past 5 years have been truly extraordinary in the course of the development of the party and the country. The Party Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, has united the Chinese people of all ethnic groups and led them in implementing the five-sphere integrated plan and a four-pronged comprehensive strategy. We have seen historic achievements and shifts in the course of the party and the country. Socialism with Chinese characteristics has entered a new era. Under the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, the 12th NPC Standing Committee has fully implemented all the guiding principles from the party's 18th and 19th National Congresses, earnestly studied and observed Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, and remained committed to the unity of party leadership, the running of the country by the people and law-based governance. We have upheld the authority and core position of General Secretary Xi Jinping and safeguarded the authority and centralized, unified leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core. We have fulfilled our duties as set out in the Constitution and the law, broken new ground in all dimensions of the work of People's Congresses, and made significant theoretical and practical innovations in developing the People's Congress systems. With these efforts, we have made major strides in developing socialist democracy and the rule of law. Over the past 5 years, the 12th NPC and its Standing Committee have enacted 25 laws, revised 127 laws, passed 46 decisions on legal questions and other major issues, and issued 9 legal interpretations. Our legislative work has been characterized by the great number, importance, pace, and effectiveness of activities. We inspected the enforcement of 26 laws and 1 decision on legal issues, heard and deliberated 83 work reports, passed 7 resolutions, and conducted 15 special inquiries and 22 research projects. We have improved our oversight mechanisms and made our oversight work more effective. We ratified a total of 43 treaties and agreements with foreign countries and international conventions China had concluded, and decided on or approved the appointment or removal of a number of officials of state bodies. First, we strengthened legislation in key areas and improved the Chinese socialist system of laws with the Constitution at the center, producing draft amendments to the Constitution. As China's fundamental law, the Constitution provides a general charter for governing the country and embodies the will of the party and the people. Taking into account the overall context and strategic requirements for upholding and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era, the 19th Party Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, decided to amend the Constitution. At its second plenary session, the Central Committee deliberated and passed recommendations on amendments to be made. The 12th NPC Standing Committee then moved forward with this work in line with legal procedures. At our 32nd meeting held in January this year, we discussed in depth the Party Central Committee's recommendations and prepared a draft of the Constitution amendments to be made, which has been submitted to this session of the 13th NPC for deliberation. Every one of us on the Standing Committee approves and supports the Party Central Committee's decision on amending the Constitution. We unanimously believe that writing the major theoretical viewpoints, policies, and principles set down at the 19th National Party Congress, particularly Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, into China's fundamental law is of crucial and far-reaching significance in that it will ensure the Constitution improves and develops in step with the times and provide a firm constitutional guarantee for upholding and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era. Improving laws and institutions for ensuring enforcement of the Constitution. We established Constitutional Day to raise public awareness and promote the spirit of the Constitution. We developed the system of pledging constitutional allegiance, under which all officials must publicly swear allegiance and loyalty to the Constitution, the country, and the people when taking office. In line with constitutional provisions, we adopted the decision on granting amnesty to certain prisoners on the occasion of the 70th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and in the global war against fascism. We enacted the law on national medals and titles of honor to ensure implementation of the system of national awards and honors stipulated in the Constitution. We adopted the national anthem law, which, together with the national flag law and the national emblem law, already in implementation, safeguards the dignity of the important national symbols and images established by the Constitution. Moving faster to develop laws related to national security. Adopting a holistic approach to national security, we maintained firm political resolve and acted at the right time to enact a number of important laws, including the National Security Law, the Counter-Espionage Law, the Anti-Terrorism Law, the Law on Administration of Activities of Overseas Non-Governmental Organizations in the mainland of China, the Cybersecurity Law, the National Intelligence Law, the Law on National Defense Transportation, the Military Facilities Protection Law, and the Nuclear Safety Law. Together, these laws provide a strong legal guarantee for safeguarding China's national security and other core interests. Advancing the compilation of the Civil Code and enacting the general provisions of civil law. Developing a civil code is a formidable task that generations of Chinese legislators have been working on since the founding of the People's Republic of China. The Standing Committee elected to adopt a two-step approach to this work. First, developing the general provisions of civil law, which is the leading part of the civil code, and then compiling the individual books of the civil code, striving to form a complete civil code by 2020. Following 3 readings and repeated modifications by the Standing Committee, the draft of the general provisions of civil law was adopted at the 5th session of the 12th NPC in 2017. The promulgation of the general provisions marks the completion of the opening part of China's civil code and sets down a solid foundation for developing a civil code with Chinese characteristics that embodies the spirit of the times and reflects the will of the people. At present, work on compiling the individual books is right underway. Strengthening legislation for the socialist market economy. We issued guidelines on implementing the principle of taxation legality, and to this end, charted a reform path and produced a legislative agenda running until 2020. We enacted the Environmental Protection Tax Law, the Tobacco Leaf Tax Law, the Vessel Tonnage Tax Law, and revised the law on corporate income tax. We examined and overhauled laws on property rights protection. We also revised the anti-unfair competition law, the law on promoting small and medium-sized enterprises, the law on farmers' specialized cooperatives, the law on promoting the application of scientific and technological advances, the standardization law, the trademark law, the advertising law, and enacted the tourism law and the asset appraisal law. Using legislation to promote core socialist values. We adopted decisions on instituting Martyrs' Day, Victory Day in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression, and National Memorial Day for the Nanjing Massacre victims, and deliberated the draft of a law on the protection of heroes and martyrs. These helped foster our national spirit with patriotism at its core. By enacting the law on guaranteeing public cultural services, the law on public libraries, and the film industry promotion law, we remedied the deficiencies in legislation in the cultural sector. Using legislation to ensure improvements to the people's well-being, to meet the people's growing demands for a beautiful environment, we have acted to develop the strictest possible system of environmental protection laws. As part of this endeavor, we revised the environmental protection law, amended the air pollution prevention and control law, the water pollution prevention control law, the maritime environment protection law, and the wildlife protection law, and established public interest litigation systems for environmental protection and resource conservation. We revised the food safety law to help ensure every bite of food is safe. We also enacted the charity law, the anti-domestic violence law, the special equipment safety law, revised the law on workplace safety and the law on the protection of consumers' rights and interests, and passed Amendment 9 to the criminal law. Taking firm steps to uphold constitutional order in Hong Kong and Macau SARs, as stipulated in China's constitution and the basic laws of the two regions. Exercising powers entrusted to us by China's constitution and the basic laws of the Hong Kong SAR, we issued a decision on issues related to electing a chief executive by universal suffrage in the Hong Kong SAR, thus clarifying the direction and basic institutional arrangements for gradually and systematically developing democracy in the region. We also produced an interpretation of Article 104 of the Basic Law of the Hong Kong SAR, which has served to resolutely deter and oppose any attempt at Hong Kong independence and safeguard the sanctity of China's constitution and the basic law of the Hong Kong SAR. We approved the cooperation agreement between the mainland and Hong Kong on the co-location arrangement so that both sides can carry out customs clearance at the port established at the West Kowloon station of the Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail Link. In line with China's constitution and the basic law of Hong Kong, we adopted the decision on adding the national anthem law to Annex 3 of the basic laws of Hong Kong and Macau to ensure its observance in the two regions. Making fresh progress in ensuring lawmaking is well-conceived, democratic, and law-based. We have strengthened organization, coordination, and legislative work, and have given full play to the principal role of people's congresses and the standing committees in lawmaking. We have, for the 4 consecutive years since 2015, submitted drafts of important laws to the NPC for deliberation. Further, we have established the system under which special committees of the NPC and working bodies of its standing committee organize the drafting of important legislation. These steps have resulted in 70 pieces of legislation being drafted or submitted for deliberation over the past 5 years.
We have encouraged legislative bodies to play a greater role in voicing, balancing, and adjusting the interests of different sectors of society in order to build the broadest consensus in legislation. We have formulated procedures for collecting and discussing legislative items, for carrying out debates and consultation on major legislative changes that affect the interest of different groups, and for conducting third-party evaluation of legislative items. We have improved the system of legislative advisors and established a system for staying connected with the local communities on legislative matters. We made it regular practice to solicit public opinions on draft of legislation following both first and further readings, a step which has seen 81 drafts of legislation being released for public comments. Starting with the first piece of legislation on this standing committee adopted, we have implemented a system of carrying out evaluation before promulgation to make lawmaking better conceived and more meticulous, and to ensure that every law we enact stands up, is workable, and produces the desirable effect. Second, we leveraged the guiding and driving role of legislation and ensured all reform have a legal basis and proceed smoothly. Ensuring law-based implementation of the reform of the national supervision system, acting in line with the Party Central Committee's decision, reform of the national supervision system, we issued a decision on carrying out trials in the reform in Beijing, Shanxi, Zhejiang, and thereafter a decision on extending the trials to the rest of the country, thereby providing legal support for the orderly advancement of the reform. We channeled energy into drafting a supervision law, and after holding 2 readings and soliciting public opinions, we have produced a draft of the law, which has been submitted to this session for deliberation. Improving the mechanism for issuing authorization and reform decisions. We issued authorization and reform decisions in accordance with the law for cases when proposed reform conflict with existing laws, conditions for revising relevant law did not exist, and reform measures that's needed to undergo preliminary trials. We heard and deliberated reports on pilot reforms at appropriate junctures and strengthened supervision and evaluation of their progress. For reform measures requiring further exploration, we decided to either extend the trial period or launch new trials with a view to further refining reform measures. For those proving to be effective in practice, we revised relevant laws to allow for their application in more regions. Over the past 5 years, we have issued a total of 21 authorization and reform decisions to support reform on pilot-free trade zones, rural collective land ownership, the judicial system, national defense, and the armed forces. Strengthening our work on enacting, revising, abolishing, and interpreting laws related to reform. For specific articles across law that are at odds with reform requirements, our approach has been to make coordinated revision to these laws by putting forward multiple drafts at the same time. In the past 5 years, we deliberated and passed 15 decisions revising law adopting this approach, which have resulted in coordinated revision being made to 95 laws. This approach has led to progress in reform in government review and approval and professional qualification verification, and has boosted the vitality of the market and society. Responding to the Party Central Committee's major decisions on reforming and adjusting China's policy on birth control, we moved quickly to revise the population and family planning law. We issued a decision on abolishing law and regulation pertaining to re-education through labor. We produced the interpretation of certain articles in the criminal law and the criminal procedure law. 3. We improved oversight mechanisms to strengthen oversight over the enforcement of the Constitution and the law and over the work of the State Council, the Supreme People's Court, and Supreme People's Procuratorate, improving law enforcement inspection mechanism and special inquiries. We made inspecting law enforcement a priority in our oversight work, increasing the number of inspection programs per year to 6 since 2015. Inspection teams have seen a cumulative participation figure of 96 for members of the Chairperson Council who headed up the teams, and a deputy participation figure of around 900, which includes members of the Standing Committee and special committees. Inspections have targeted pressing problems with the goal of establishing the actual circumstances, pinpointing the causes, making pertinent suggestions, and pushing for remediations. In line with these goals, we have developed a work procedure covering the completion inspection processes, which constitute the 6 steps to subject selection, organization, reporting, deliberation, remediation, and feedback. We issued guidelines on improving specific inquiries, requiring that questions are to the point and answers are based on fact, so that people's concerns are voiced and responded to in this process. Over the past 5 years, the total attendance of leading officials from the State Council and other relevant departments at special inquiries to hear comments and answers for questions was 155. As a result, law enforcement inspection and special inquiry have become more impactful and authoritative and have come to play a greater role in making the NPC's oversight more effective and helping relevant departments improve their work. Developing new mechanism for the review and oversight of government budget and financial accounts. Revised the budget law to enrich provisions on strengthening review and oversight of government budget and final accounts by People's Congress, and work towards a comprehensive, procedure-based, transparent budget system that uses well-conceived standards and imposes effective constraint. We improved the mechanism under which the State Council report to the NPC Standing Committee on the rectification of problems discovered in auditing and heard and deliberated its report on the work in each of the past 3 years. We put in place a system through which the State Council reports to the NPC Standing Committee on the management of state-owned assets. We issued guidelines on People's Congress, expanding the focus of their budget review and oversight to cover expenditure, budget, and policy, improve the mechanism for soliciting opinions from deputies and the public prior to review of government budgets, moved forward with the integrated outline oversight of budget, and ensure review of object budget and financial accounts and real-time online oversight over the whole process of budget implementation. Strengthening follow-up oversight to help make gains in the 3 battles against potential risk, poverty, and pollution. In the concerned fight to foresell and diffuse major risk, we approved the implementation of ceiling on local government debt and heard deliberate reports on local government debt management, emphasizing the need to clearly establish the total amount of debt, tighten debt regulation, control debt expansion, and reduce outstanding debts. We deliberated reports on the final account of the central government on the implementation of budget and on preventing financial risks, reviewed and approved central government financial accounts and revision of the central government's budget for each year, and strengthened supervision over the use of transfer payment and central government special funding for key sectors such as science and technology, water conservancy, and education. As part of the national endeavor to combat poverty, we heard and deliberated the State Council's report on this work on 2 separate occasions and held inquiries. Carried out continuous oversight throughout the past 5 years over the government's handling of 127 key suggestions, focused on poverty reduction in areas with large ethnic minority population and a revolutionary basis area, when inspecting the implementation of the law on regional ethnic autonomy and conducting research on reinvigorating the former Central Soviet area in southern Jiangxi. In the nationwide battle to prevent and control pollution, we inspected enforcement of environmental protection law on prevention and control of environmental pollution caused by solid waste, the air pollution prevention and control law, and 3 other environmental laws. We heard and deliberated the State Council's report on the state of the environment and the fulfillment of environmental protection targets for the last 2 years, and 7 other reports it produced on topics such as ecological compensation, the building of natural reserves, and grassland ecological conservation. These efforts have given impetus to pronounced environmental problems. Strengthening oversight over economic work to promote implementation of the new development philosophy. Examined and approved the 13th five-year plan and heard and deliberated a midterm evaluation report on the implementation of the 12th five-year plan and yearly report on the plans for national economic and social development. Our work has helped ensure fulfillment of the major economic and social development objectives. Focusing on promoting supply-side structural reform and expanding and strengthening the real economy, we heard and deliberated reports on the transformation and upgrading of the manufacturing industry and on the application of information technologies in industrialization, and expected enforcement of the product quality law, the law on promoting the application of scientific and technological advances, and patent law, to ensure development of agriculture in rural areas and sustain growth in rural income. We heard and deliberated reports on issues such as developing the new countryside, rural land contracting, rural financial reform and development, and scientific and technological innovation in agriculture and forestry, and inspected enforcement of the agriculture law and the seed law. To promote balanced development between regions and between urban and rural areas, we heard and deliberated reports on the large-scale development of the Western region and urbanization, using a variety of oversight methods to ensure and improve in the course of China's development, to ensure people's safety in their work and lives. We carry out an inspection on the enforcement of food safety law following its revision, and in the same year, heard and deliberated the State Council's feedback report on how it has responded to our inspection report and comments. We inspected implementation of the workplace safety law, the road traffic safety law, the cybersecurity law, and the law on protection of consumers' rights and interests, and heard and deliberated reports on workplace safety, drug administration, and prevention control of infectious disease. We inspected the enforcement of the law on vocational education, the law on compulsory education, the law on the protection of minors, and the law on guaranteeing the rights and interests of senior citizens. To promote equitable access to basic public services, we heard and deliberated reports on the development of urban and rural social security systems, the reform of the medical and healthcare system, and the development of the system of public cultural services.
Strengthening oversight of the work of the judiciary to safeguard judicial impartiality. We heard and deliberated 15 reports by the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate, and strengthened supervision over work relating to judicial reform, judicial opponents, administrative hearings, and fight against corruption. We supported and promoted judicial bodies to see they fully implement the Party Central Committee's major decisions and plans on deepening judicial structural reform and exercise their judicial and procuratorial powers impartially and in accordance with the law. All this has helped to improve judicial credibility. Fulfilling our constitutional oversight duty and improving the normative document recording and review system. To facilitate the recording and review of normative documents, we implemented a coordinating mechanism, developed work procedures, and established a nationally unified information platform. This has enabled us to meet the requirements that all normative documents must be kept on record, all documents on record must be reviewed, and any error discovered must be rectified. In a first for the NPC Standing Committee, we heard and deliberated a report on the recording and review of normative documents. Over the past 5 years, we have received a total of 4,778 normative documents submitted for recording and review, reviewed 188 administrative regulations and judicial interpretations, carried out targeted review of local statutes in key areas, and carefully examined 1,527 suggestions on our review work from citizens and organizations. If any review document was found to be at odds with the law or inappropriate, we urged the formulating body to make necessary corrections. With this, we have ensured the execution of the central leadership's orders and prohibitions, compliance with the Constitution and the law, and the unity of the country's legal system. Fourth, we deepened and expanded our work related to deputies to give full play to their role. Maintaining good communication with deputies and the people. We established and observed systems for members of the Chairperson's Council and the Standing Committee to maintain contact with NPC deputies. This has resulted in direct communication between Chairperson's Council members and 87 deputies and between Standing Committee members and 333 deputies. We expanded the channels for deputies to participate in the work of the Standing Committee and special committees, seeing a deputy attendance of over 1,500 in law enforcement inspections and 1,600 at Standing Committee meetings in a non-voting capacity. We have achieved the goal of ensuring that all local-level NPC deputies attend at least one Standing Committee meeting in a non-voting capacity during their tenure. We improved the system for issuing circulars to deputies on important work of the Standing Committee and special committees. We formulated guidelines on helping deputies maintain close contact with the people and organized research projects and inspection tours for deputies to ensure that the channels for reflecting social conditions and public sentiment operate smoothly. Ensuring deputies' proposals are examined and suggestions are handled more efficiently. Over the past 5 years, deputies to the 12th NPC submitted 2,366 proposals and 41,353 suggestions. Every year, we heard and deliberated reports of special committees on their examination of deputies' proposals and heard reports from the Standing Committee's General Office and relevant departments on the handling of deputies' suggestions. These reports were distributed to all deputies. Of the proposals submitted by deputies, 514 relate to 59 legislative items that have been deliberated and adopted. 153 relate to 12 legislative items that are currently under deliberation, and 37 concern 22 oversight tasks which have already been carried out. Departments charged with handling deputies' suggestions have taken this as an opportunity to improve the conduct and work and have strived to process and give feedback on every single suggestion referred to them. We merged 860 suggestions relating to issues of common concern to deputies into 91 key suggestions and required relevant NPC Standing Committees to oversee their handling by relevant departments, resolving some major and difficult problems of immediate concern to the people, helping deputies improve their thinking and conduct, and strengthening supervision to see the fully fulfill their duties. We improved the system of study and training for deputies, holding 22 study sessions with a cumulative attendance of 520 to ensure that every local-level NPC deputy gets to attend during their tenure at least one study session on matters relating to their duties. Review of deputies' qualifications was strengthened. We supported electoral bodies in supervising the duty, performance, and activities of the deputies in accordance with the law, and in urging the deputies to observe the Constitution and the law in an exemplary manner and cultivate a positive image as deputies to People's Congresses. Fifth, we improved the People's Congress system to strengthen the foundation for state power and the party's long-term governance. Strengthening the work and development of People's Congresses at the county and township levels. Within China's 5-level People's Congress system, People's Congresses at the county and township levels play a special and crucial role. Based on a research project carried out over 2 years, we developed the guidelines on strengthening the work and development of People's Congresses at these 2 levels, which was submitted to the Party Central Committee for approval and dissemination. In step with this, we amended the organic law of the local People's Congresses and local People's Governments, the electoral law for the National People's Congresses and local People's Congresses, and the law on deputies to National People's Congresses and deputies to local People's Congresses. There is a broad consensus now on colleagues in local People's Congresses that these steps represent the best in the 5 years and helping to resolve the pronounced problems long holding back their work. We convened a conference on strengthening the work and development of county and township level People's Congresses and a meeting to exchange experience in this regard. We provided training to the leading Standing Committee members of 2,850 county level People's Congresses. And a new round of training has been initiated in 2017. Thanks to the concerted efforts of all sides, we have seen People's Congresses at the county and township levels taking on a brand new look in their work and development. granting local legislative powers to all cities with subsidiary districts. At its third session in 2015, the 12th NPC adopted a decision on revising the legislation law. The revised law grants local legislative powers to cities with subsidiary districts and defines the scope and limits of these powers. This represents a further improvement to China's legislative system. In addition to the 31 provinces, autonomous regions and municipalities directly under the central government, and the 49 relatively large cities that already had local legislative powers prior to the revision. Another 274 administrative areas now also enjoy these powers, including 240 cities with subsidiary districts, 30 autonomous prefectures, and 4 prefecture-level cities without subsidiary districts. Over the past 3 years, the People's Congresses of Cities and Autonomous Prefectures newly granted local legislative powers have formulated 595 local regulations, providing a strong legal underpinning for strengthening and making innovations in local governance. To better guide the legislative work of local People's Congresses, we have held 5 national forums on local legislation and 8 training sessions on legislative work to strengthen the guidance to local People's Congresses. Safeguarding the sanctity of People's Congress system. Implementing the Party Central Committee's decision and arrangements, we revoked, in accordance with the law, the qualifications of 45 deputies to the 12th NPC elected by Liaoning Provincial People's Congress for bribing voters. Acting on the basis of the Constitution and relevant legal principles, we made creative institutional arrangements to promptly and appropriately handle problems arising from this voting bribery case in Liaoning Province. In organizing, according to law, the election of deputies to the 13th National People's Congress and guiding the election of new deputies to local People's Congresses, we have drawn on the lessons learned from the voting bribery case in Liaoning Province and the Hengyang City of Hunan Province and used a combination of strict preventative measures and disciplinary regulations to ensure that elections are honest and based on integrity. 6. We strengthen the NPC's international exchanges to serve China's major country diplomacy. Strengthening friendly exchanges with foreign parliaments. We received 275 parliamentary delegations on visits to China and organized 311 Chinese delegations to overseas countries. We signed 21 cooperation agreements with the parliaments of 19 countries and the Inter-Parliamentary Union, and established mechanisms for regular exchanges and carried out 65 exchange activities with the European Parliament, the parliaments of 21 countries, including Russia, the United States, and other countries. For the first time, we received a delegation of parliamentary leaders of 7 Nordic and Baltic countries. We actively engaged in multilateral parliamentary diplomatic activities. In my capacity as chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, I attended the 4th World Conference of Speakers of Parliament and also the Assembly of the IPU in what was a first for the chairman of the NPC Standing Committee. On these occasions, I talked about China's stand and propositions on issues like alleviating poverty, peaceful development, and great democracy in international relations. We also played a constructive role in the Asia-Pacific Parliamentary Forum, the BRICS Parliamentary Forum, the Latin American Parliament, and other international and regional parliamentary organizations. Leveraging the unique role of People's Congresses in foreign relations. Building on results achieved by President Xi Jinping in his major diplomatic initiatives, we continue to increase mutual understanding and political trust between China and other countries to ensure stronger public support for close relations with China in these countries. We encouraged the parliaments of relevant countries to support and approve documents on cooperating with China and strengthen the legal guarantees and policy coordination for jointly advancing the Belt and Road Initiative.
We strengthen international exchanges on the topic of state governance, emphasizing the development of democracy and rule of law, tell the Chinese stories and the story of the People's Congress, and strive to increase the international community's understanding, recognition of, and support for China's development path and foreign domestic policies. Noticing certain countries' erroneous statement and improper actions on issues affecting China's core interest, we responded with appropriate countermeasures and make our stand known. China's sovereignty, security, and development interests have thus been safeguarded. Seven, we advanced party building in the NPC and the Standing Committee and improved our ability to fulfill our duties in a high-quality, law-based way, strengthening the leading party member group of the Standing Committee in accordance with the Party Central Committee's strategy for exercising governance over the party to see it steering direction, managing the big picture, and guaranteeing implementation. We've given top priority to political building and remained committed to closely align ourselves with the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core in terms of political stance, direction, principle, and path. Over the past 5 years, we have requested instructions from and submitted reports to the Central Committee on 202 issues. We've launched study initiative to gain a thorough understanding of Xi Jinping's thoughts on socialism and Chinese characteristics for a new era, carry out activities to ensure better understanding and fulfillment of the party mass line, observe the 3 stricts and 3 earnests, and made it regular practice as an institutional requirement for all party members to gain good commands of the party constitution, party regulation, General Secretary Xi Jinping's major policy addresses, and to meet party standards. These efforts have enabled all of us to develop theoretical competence. We have convened 58 study sessions for leading party member group for the Standing Committee and organized 31 Standing Committee seminars. We strengthened leadership of the leading party member group and Standing Committee offices, set up branches group in special committees, and convened conferences on party building initiatives. With this, we have ensured implementation of strict party self-governance with the NPC and the Standing Committee, working tirelessly to transform and improve our work style. We ensure adherence to the guidelines of the leading party's member group of the NPC Standing Committee on acting the party's mass line and improve our work style and full implementation of the measures on the members of the Chairperson's Council and the Standing Committee observing the Party Central Committee 8-point decisions on poverty and government conduct. We've taken strong measures to address the practice of formalities for formality's sake, bureaucratism, and extravagance. Research is a basic skill we must command to do the work of the NPC well, and it requires us to engage with local communities, familiarize ourselves with the conditions on the ground, establish the facts, and pinpoint problems. Implementing instructions of General Secretary Xi Jinping, we introduced and put into practice in each of the last 4 years specific measures for ensuring good organization, deputy conduct in NPC sessions. We established a system for reporting the attendance of members of the Standing Committee and special committees at Standing Committee meetings, improving work on media, public communication, and theoretical research. Marking the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the NPC, we carried out a systematic review of the experience gained so far implementing the People's Congress system. We took effective measures to communicate our achievement in developing China's fundamental political system, democracy, and the rule of law, providing authoritative interpretation of major legislation, and hold seminars for explaining laws to ensure compliance, and strive to make the work of People's Congresses more transparent. We founded the China Society for Theoretical Research on the System of People's Congress to strengthen theoretical and practical research on developing socialist democracy and the rule of law. The work of special committees, administrative and working bodies of the Standing Committee and special committees and local People's Congress. Special committees of the NPC have worked to fulfill their duties in accordance with the law. They did productive work in organizing the drafting of major legislation, organizing law enforcement inspection, and carry out in-depth research projects. The administrative and working bodies of the Standing Committee and special committees have accepted the special inspection and oversight by Central Discipline Inspection Team, comprehensively strengthened party building, and worked to tighten discipline and improve conduct. They have improved the competence and professionalism of the staff and played their role in assessing and supporting deputies. Local People's Congresses have assisted the Standing Committee in conducting law enforcement inspection, doing research for pending legislation, serving deputies, and carrying out foreign relations work. They have improved the quality of the overall work of the People's Congresses. fellow deputies, the key to the achievement of the 12th NPC and the Standing Committee have been the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, and the guidance of Xi Jinping thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. These achievements are the result of the work of all NPC deputies, NPC standing committees, and special committee members, and the staff of the administrative and working bodies of the standing committee and special committees. The result of the cooperation given by State Council, the Supreme People's Court, the Supreme People's Procuratorate, and local people's congresses at all levels. And the result of the trust that the Chinese people have placed in us and their support for us. On behalf of the Standing Committee of the 12th NPC, I would like to express our highest respect and sincere gratitude to them all. In review on work of the past 5 years, we are aware that there are still many areas where improvement needs to be made in ensuring law-based governance in all areas. Among these include the need to make legislation more timely, systematic, targeted, and effective. The need for stronger measures to put an end to law being ignored and not being strictly enforced and violations of the law going unpunished. The need to expand communication between the Standing Committee and deputies and between deputies and the public, and the need to improve the organizational and working system of the NPC and the Standing Committees and Special Committees. I will now move on to discuss what we have learned from our work of the past 5 years. Since the 18th National Party Congress, the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core has attached importance to the development of the People's Congress system and strengthened leadership over all dimensions of the work of the People's Congresses. In a speech at the meeting marking the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the NPC, General Secretary Xi Jinping expounded on the historical necessity and great significance of establishing the People's Congress system in China, put forward the fundamental requirement of upholding and improving the system, and elaborated on the principles for keeping to the path of socialist political advancement with Chinese characteristics. This speech is a pragmatic document guiding our effort to improve the People's Congress system in step with the times and advanced development of socialist democracy. General Secretary Xi Jinping has, in a consecutive of 4 years, presided over meetings of the Standing Committee of the Political Bureau and Party Central Committee to hear work briefing by the leading party members group of the NPC Standing Committee, and has on numerous occasions conducted research on questions and issues concerning the work of the People's Congresses. The Party Central Committee has issued documents for issues concerning the party's leadership over legislative work, enhancing the work and development of country and township-level People's Congresses, improving the system by which People's Congress discuss and decide major issues, and strengthening deputy-related work. These documents have charted the course and provided the principle to follow for work of People's Congresses under new circumstances. Through our practical endeavors, we have gained a deeper understanding of the content and properties of the People's Congress system, as well as the functions of the People's Congresses and the laws underpinning their work. First, party leadership is the essential element and the greatest strength of the People's Congress system. We must uphold a centralized, unified leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core. Leadership of the party is the defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics and the greatest strength of the system, socialism with Chinese characteristics. as a creation of the Communist Party of China and the Chinese people. The People's Congress system is the fundamental political system for ensuring the unity of party leadership, the running of the country by the people, a law-based governance. Within this system, it is the party's leadership which is the essential element and greatest strength. And as such, the key for guarantee people's congresses do their work well. The NPC and the Standing Committee, both important political bodies under the leadership of the Party Central Committee, must strengthen their consciousness of the need to maintain political integrity, think in big picture terms, follow leadership, and keep in alignment, upholding the authority and core position of General Secretary Xi Jinping, safeguard the authority and centralized unified leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, ensure genuine integration of party leadership, the running of the country by its people, law-based governance as an organic whole, and see that party leadership is manifested in everything people's congresses do.
We must base the planning and progress of our work on the overall work of the party and the country, and promptly respond to the needs of the party and the people, have the courage to shoulder responsibilities and the ability to make accomplishments and never shirk important tasks, and ensure that the party's positions become the will of the country through legally established procedures. We must strictly implement the system for requesting instructions and submitting reports, regularly submitting work reports to the Party Central Committee, promptly requesting instructions on major issues in our work, and implementing its decisions and plans in their entirety. Second, the party's philosophies constitute a sound guide for upholding and improving the People's Congress system. We must fully observe Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. The establishment and implementation of the People's Congress system in China is an important outcome of integrating the Marxist theory of the state with China's realities. Since the 18th National Party Congress, General Secretary Xi Jinping has put forward a series of new concepts, thoughts and strategies on upholding and improving the People's Congress system and developing socialist democracy. These have substantiated and enriched the core content, basic features and fundamental requirements of the People's Congress system and socialist democracy, and further developed the Marxist theory of the state. As important components of Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, these represent a sound theoretical guide for upholding the system of the long term and continuously improving it in a new era. The NPC and the Standing Committee must thoroughly put into practice Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, earnestly implement all the guiding principles from the 19th National Party Congress, act in complete conformity with the party's basic theory, line and policy, further strengthen the political stand and sense of political responsibility, and develop a stronger theoretical foundation for upholding and improving the People's Congress system and securing solid progress in the work of the People's Congresses in the new era. Following the learning style of combining theory with practice, we must ensure a good command of the requirements of socialism with Chinese characteristics and the realities of both the People's Congress system and our work, and use the latest achievements in adapting Marxism to the Chinese context to guide our practice and lead us through difficulties. With this, we shall see that the People's Congress system and the work of People's Congresses are full of vitality and up to date. Third, the People's Congress system is an important channel and the highest form through which the principle of the people running the country is realized. We must ensure this principle is put into action in China's political and social activities across the board. China is a socialist country with a people's democratic dictatorship led by the working class and based on an alliance of workers and farmers. All state power belongs to the people. The People's Congress system in China is the choice of history and also the Chinese people. Developing socialist democracy means to reflect the will of the people, uphold the rights and interests, unleash their creativity, and develop institutions to guarantee the running of the country. The NPC and its Standing Committee exercise state power on behalf of the people. This requires us to uphold the principal status of the people, develop legal and institutional guarantees for the running of the country, expand their orderly political participation, and ensure their extensive rights and freedoms prescribed by law. We must always put the people first as we carry out legislative and oversight work and handle deputies' suggestions to address problems affecting their well-being and continuously improve their lives and attend to all their concerns. Deputies to the People's Congresses are members of organs of state power. They represent the interests and will of the people and take part in the exercise of state power in accordance with the law. Respecting the deputy's principal position is inherent to upholding the people's principal status and ensuring the running of the country. We must support and ensure deputies' law-based performance of their duties and increase communication with deputies and the people. We must exercise our powers and perform our duties in the people's interests, provide services for them, and accept their oversight. Fourth, law-based governance in all fields is an essential requirement of and also an important guarantee for socialism with Chinese characteristics. We must ensure that People's Congresses and their standing committees fully play their important role in advancing law-based governance. The fourth plenary session of the 18th Party Central Committee saw the adoption of the party's first-ever standalone decision on strengthening the rule of law. This decision states that the overall goal of comprehensively advancing law-based governance is to establish a system of socialist rule of law with Chinese characteristics and build a socialist country based on the rule of law. Further, the fact that advancing law-based governance has been included as part of China's four-pronged comprehensive strategy is of great significance for improving socialism with Chinese characteristics and modernizing China's system and capacity for governance. The NPC and its Standing Committee showed heavy responsibilities in building China into a socialist country of rule of law. We must understand that to ensure the law-based governance of China, first, we must ensure governance of the country based on the Constitution. We need to ensure full implementation of the Constitution by fulfilling our oversight duties and safeguard the sanctity of the Constitution and the law. We must make legislation our top priority, take a balanced approach to the enactment, revision, abolishment, and interpretation of laws, and improve the Chinese socialist system of laws centered on the Constitution. We must tailor legislation to the needs of reform and development, ensuring reform is advanced under the rule of law, and the rule of law is improved through reform. Focusing on raising the quality of legislation, we need to legislate in a well-conceived, democratic, and law-based manner, so that good laws are made to promote development and ensure good governance. Legislating in a well-conceived manner is essentially about taking into account China's conditions and realities, following and reflecting objective laws, and carrying out legislative work in a sound, coordinated, and systematic way, to ensure the laws we enact stand the test of practice and history, Legislating democratically is essentially about making sure we legislate for the people and rely on them in doing so, and expanding the channels through which deputies and public participate in lawmaking to ensure every piece of legislation is constitutional, enjoys people's support, and reflects their will. Legislating in accordance with the law is essentially about exercising legislative powers in strict observance of statutory mandates and procedures, improving legislative systems and mechanisms, optimizing the allocation of legislative functions and powers, and safeguarding the unity of the country's legal system. The oversight over law enforcement and over the work of governments, courts, and procuratorate by People's Congresses and their standing committees is an inherent requirement and institutional arrangement of the People's Congress system. We must effectively exercise the oversight power granted to us by the Constitution and the law, ensuring proper and effective law enforcement as a key task in advancing the law-based governance of China, and strengthen oversight over the work of the State Council, the Supreme People's Court, and the Supreme People's Procuratorate in accordance with the law to ensure law-based administration and judicial impartiality. We need to exercise oversight with greater intensity, ensuring it is proper and effective and produces real results. To exercise proper oversight, it is vital that we uphold the leadership of the party, exercise oversight in strict accordance with our legal mandates and statutory procedures, and have both the courage and competence to fulfill our oversight duty. We need to properly manage the relationship between conducting oversight and providing support so as to form synergy for strengthening and improving the work of the department subject to oversight. To deliver effective oversight, it is crucial that we keep in mind the overall work of the party in the country, take a problem-oriented approach, improve oversight mechanisms, and work towards resolution of the major issues of common concern to deputies and the general public. With this, we shall see the people have a greater and stronger sense of fulfillment, happiness, and security. Fifth, the People's Congress system is an important component of the system of socialism with Chinese characteristics. We must remain committed to it and keep developing it in step with the times. The confidence the Chinese people have in the People's Congress system derives from their confidence in a strong leadership of the CPC and their confidence in the past serious system and culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Throughout the historical journey of the course of the party and the country, this system has demonstrated tremendous political strength and great organizational effectiveness. It has proved through practice to be an effective political system, enabling us to act and deliver. And we can produce real results through the People's Congress system. We must keep to the path of socialist political advancement with Chinese characteristics, have full confidence in the People's Congress system, and ensure a more solid institutional guarantee for the prosperity and enduring stability of the party and the country. Having full confidence in our system shall in no way mean being complacent, much less resting on our laurels. In line with the principle of always striving for improvement by learning from past experiences, we must keep carrying out explorations to develop new mechanisms for our legislative, oversight, and deputy-related work, enrich and broaden the practice of People's Congresses to keep their work up to date, and keep enhancing and expanding the strengths and unique features of our fundamental political system. We must closely communicate with local People's Congresses, strengthen guidance and support for their work, expand cooperation and coordination and exchanges, and work with them to ensure that the People's Congress system and the work of People's Congresses move with the times. Now, let me move on to discuss what we propose for 2018. 2018 is the first year for putting into action all the guiding principles of the party's 19th National Congress, and also the year in which, according to law, the 13th NPC and its Standing Committee assume their duties. At the 19th National Congress, the party established the historical position of Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, took its first steps on a new journey to build a modern socialist country, and charted the course forward for the cause of the party and the country. It also formulated major plans on developing socialist democracy and improving the institutions through which the people run the country. It also set out clear requirements for advancing the work of the People's Congresses in a new era and promoting law-based governance. The future of the People's Congress system shines brighter than ever, and there is an even stronger sense of pride in the mission of the NPC and its Standing Committee.
Guided by Xi Jinping's thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, and fully implementing all the guiding principles from the 19th National Party Congress in the first, second, and third plenary session of the 19th Party Central Committee, we must maintain the unity of the party leadership, the running of the country by its people, and law-based governance, uphold long-term and steadily improve the People's Congress system, fulfill our functions and duties as stipulated in the Constitution and the law, and break new grounds in the work of the People's Congresses in the new era. We must ensure the party's leadership overall work, uphold the authority and core position of General Secretary Xi Jinping, safeguard the authority and centralized unified leadership of the party's Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, and ensure implementation of the party's lines, principles, and policies, the party Central Committee decision and plans in all domains of work of People's Congresses. Adhering to the principle that all state power belongs to the people, we need to strengthen the institution which ensure the running of the country by the people and support ensure their access to state power through People's Congresses. In advancing law-based governance in all fields, we must give priority to enforcing the Constitution. We need to ensure enforcement of and compliance with the Constitution, increase publicity and education of the Constitution, and raise to a new level our work on promoting the governance of the country based on the Constitution and the law. We should keep in mind overall work of the party and the country as we exercise our statutory power of enacting laws, conducting oversight, making decisions, and appointing and removing officials. We should see that the strengthening of China's fundamental political system are leveraged and the state organizes and advances all endeavors in a unified and effective way to meet the ever-growing needs of the people for a better life. The Chairperson's Council of the 12th NPC Standing Committee has approved in principle the proposed key task and legislative and oversight work plans for 2018 for the new Standing Committee and the following preliminary arrangement for this year's work. First, continue to strengthen legislative work. A legislative program of the 13th NPC Standing Committee will be drawn up to plan legislative work for the next 5 years. The organic law for a state institution will be improved with revision to made to the organic law of the People's Courts, the organic law of the People's Procuratorate, and the civil service law. The system of laws for developing modernized economy will be improved. Work on compiling the civil code will move faster, so its individual books can undergo deliberation. In line with the principle of tax legality, we have made plans for producing a tax law on farmland used for non-agricultural purposes, a law on vehicle purchase tax, and resource tax law for conducting research to formulate a real estate tax law, and for revising the law on tax collection and administration. Steps will be taken to formulate a foreign investment law and an e-commerce law, and to revise the law on the contracting on rural land and the land administration law. Legislative efforts in the social, cultural, and environmental sectors will be strengthened to formulate a community correction law, a law on promoting basic medical and healthcare, and a law on prevention and control of soil pollution, and to revise the law on the prevention and control of environmental pollution caused by solid waste. The criminal procedure law will also be revised. Work on authorization and reform decisions will continue to be carried out effectively to ensure reforms proceed smoothly and in line with the rule of law. Second, continue to strengthen the oversight work, with a focus on promoting high-quality development and helping ensure success with 3 critical initiatives to prevent and diffuse major tasks, reduce poverty with target measures, and prevent and control pollution. We've made plans for inspecting the enforcement of the Statistics Law, the Air Pollution Prevention Control Law, the Marine Environmental Protection Law, the Law on Protecting Against the Mitigation Earthquake Disasters, the Law on the Quality and Safety and Agricultural Products, and the Law on Prevention and Control of Infectious Diseases. A midterm assessment report on the implementation of 13th Five-Year Plan will be heard and deliberated, and will report on the management of state-owned assets and implementation of major national science and technological programs and advancement of supply-side structural reform in agriculture, the progress in promoting coordinated development of compulsory education in urban rural areas, the allocation and use of government funds for medical and healthcare, the protection and the rights and interest of overseas Chinese, investigation, research on local government debt, and poverty alleviation will be carried out. We've also made plans for strengthening oversight of judicial work, hearing and deliberating reports on the work of people's courts to ensure enforcement of rulings, and the work of people's procuratorate to strengthen their legal oversight over civil litigation and over the execution of judgments. Improving will be made to our system and capacity for recording and reviewing normative documents, and constitutional compliance inspection will be advanced to address any inconsistency with the Constitution and law. Third, continue to improve work-related deputies. The system for work-related deputies will be improved to support and ensure deputies' law-based performance of their duties, enable them to play a bigger role. The Standing Committee will strengthen communication with deputies and see they get involved in this work and the work of the Special Committee on a broader and more profound basis. Deputies will be encouraged to foster ties with the people and will be invited to attend inspection tours and research projects on specific topics. Efforts will be made to ensure more careful deliberation of deputies' proposals and more efficient handling of their suggestions. Detailed study plans will be formulated to ensure all deputies to the new NPC attend at least one study on training sessions during their tenure. Steps will be taken to help deputies improve their thinking and conduct the strengthened oversight over the performance of duties. Guidance will be provided to local people's congresses to help them with their work on legislation, oversight, and discussion on decisions making. Improving will be made to the NPC work on international exchanges, media, public communication, and theoretical research, and standing committees' work on capacity building. We believe that under the strong leadership of the party's Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as core, and under the sound guidance of Xi Jinping thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, and with the support of the Chinese people of all ethnic groups, the new NPC and its Standing Committee will prove worthy of the great trust placed in them, fulfill their mission, and write a new chapter in the work of People's Congresses in the new era.
Because this doesn't look...
Fellow deputies, the great dream of national rejuvenation encourages us to keep striving. The great era inspires us to forge ahead, rallying even closer around the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core. Let us hold high the banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics, thoroughly study and apply Xi Jinping thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, remain true to our mission, move forward with a pioneering spirit, and work tirelessly to secure a decisive victory, to finishing the building of a moderately prosperous society in all respects, ensure the great success of socialism with China's characteristic for a new era, and realize the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation.
Well, that's China's top legislator, Zhang Dejiang, giving a report of the NPC Standing Committee, the 12th National People's Congress Standing Committee. He reviewed what has been done by the lawmakers in terms of legislation, supervision, and also some ideas for the future legislative work. Let's talk about this and also another major agenda, of course, that is the passage of the amendment of the Constitution of China. Join me here is Mr. Wang Chen.